The engagement ceremony may seem beautiful to some. For her, this day was associated with how she appeared before two thrones standing on a dais. The public whispered behind her back, discussing the appearance of the mad princess, asking how she could have married such a barbarian. They declared that in her place, they would have been ashamed to even raise their heads. They assumed that the girl would make a wonderful couple with the cannibal, and this was obvious to everyone. The princess did not find the engagement ceremony all that delightful, nor did the whole day. After all, it could have ended in her death. She had heard people say that it felt like even monsters weren't afraid of them, calling it terrible lack of culture, and suggesting that on the day of her arrival in Ronheim, she had cried and begged to be sent back to the imperial palace. No one could even imagine that if she had decided to give in so easily, she would never have had anything to do with this man. The Marquis of Ronheim, known as Rodrian, is known as a monster and barbarian throughout the north, a man feared and hated by everyone. When the princess was asked if Her Highness Chloe was willing to marry Marquis Rodrian of Ronheim, she thought that she would put down roots in Ronheim at any cost and blossom like a poisonous flower in this barren land, and thus take revenge on the people she once loved, but who destroyed her. She was Chloe Idelian, once a princess of the Arenthal Empire, and she was killed in the winter of her 32nd year. Her murder was the work of her half-brother Andrea, who was eager to take the throne, and also his mother Kavala, and in a sense it was inevitable. According to the law of the Arenthal Empire, the emperor could have several wives. The likelihood of a particular heir ascending to the throne was determined by the status of his mother. The Empress, His Majesty's legal wife, gave birth to Chloe after multiple miscarriages, and it was perfectly clear what a problem the young princess was for both of them. As a child, she had little understanding of the true state of affairs, but at the age of 7, she lost her mother. The girl was drowning in despair and confusion. She had no choice but to trust the only person who would extend a helping hand to her. Andrea hugged her and told her that she didn't need to be sad anymore. From now on, her older brother would protect her. After these words, he became the reason for the girl to live on. But in reality, her brother took control of her whole life. He said that he was just worried about her, that she should not be angry with him, that she had recently become too hot-tempered and capricious, just like Her Majesty the Empress. Chloe had no choice but to blindly cling to his words. He said that the death of her mother had thrown his poor sister off balance, but he still found an excellent groom for her, and now she would have to do her part to take care of the imperial family. Andrea claimed that he was only telling Chloe all this because he cared that she understood everything perfectly well herself. He asked how she thought everyone else felt about her except him and his mother. And gradually, in the eyes of society, Chloe turned into a mentally ill princess without even noticing how exactly this happened. She became for everyone the one who had gone mad, just like the Empress herself. Meanwhile, the minister reminded that the wife must submit to her husband, and the husband must love his wife as himself. So Chloe was sold as a commodity to the Viscount, who was 20 years her senior. On the other hand, this marriage was arranged in order to save her. If she had done as her brother said, everything would have turned out wonderfully. But those 10 years of marriage were a nightmare, and one day, when Chloe thought she would die if it continued, she barely managed to escape and find Andrea. He asked with an evil grin if she couldn't solve everyday problems on her own. "Brother?" Chloe muttered, looking at him in confusion. Andrea replied that he had enough to do without her wanting to drag him into her problems, and Chloe didn't understand what he meant. The brother turned to Chloe and asked his dear sister to do what he would ask of her one last time. He mockingly begged her to die quietly for him. He said that if Chloe returned to the Viscount, she would die anyway. And if such a worthless person and a burden as she dies, then everyone will only breathe a sigh of relief and finally be happy. Why are you telling me this, brother?" Chloe muttered in confusion. She asked him for forgiveness and was ready to admit that everything was entirely her fault. But Andrea asked if she even realized what exactly she had done wrong. The girl asked what it was. She asked to tell her so that she could fix everything. But her brother laughingly objected that a fool like her would never fix anything, even if she continued to live. Andrea looked at her and said that she had a very pathetic face at that moment. He noticed that the expression on her face was exactly the same as the day she found out her mother had died. Chloe asked what he was talking about, and Andrea asked her who she thought had driven the Empress to madness, and then admitted that it was he and his mother. Now he no longer had any reason to keep Chloe alive to avoid suspicion. He thought that everyone was very lucky that an idiot like Chloe would never become empress, but the girl, shocked by these words, still managed to scream before she met her death. Chloe let out a loud scream and her eyes widened, filled with tears. It was bright and the luxurious furnishings of the room were shining, and Chloe didn't understand what had happened or where she was. The girl did not understand how this could happen because she clearly remembered that Andrea killed her. She felt her body, but there was no sword wound on it, even if she could admit that she had miraculously survived. Maybe she just had a bad dream and none of this actually happened. However, it was too realistic to be a simple dream. The place where she was wounded still ached. The maid who entered the room asked what Her Highness was doing, whether she had been conscious all this time, since she should have called someone since she had come to her senses. She asked if the conversation about marriage was so unbearable for the princess that she fainted in the middle of dinner. The maid suddenly said that, frankly speaking, this engagement was too luxurious for a princess like Chloe. The words about the engagement made the girl think. The maid continued chatting, saying that thanks to the princess, she had already had to prepare for this dinner twice, and Chloe meanwhile noted that the room they were in was similar to the one in the princess's palace, and she clearly remembered that it was torn down a year after her marriage to build a hunting ground. And here Chloe was again, just like before, as if none of this had happened. The maid said something about how even if it were a viscount's title, bought with money, a viscount is a viscount even in Africa. Otherwise, who would dare to marry a princess? Chloe realized that they were talking about an engagement to the viscount, but was such a thing really possible? Chloe even asked the maid if she meant marriage to Viscount Pelsis. The maid was surprised by Chloe's bewilderment, because who else but him would marry a princess who, at 22 years old, still doesn't have a husband? Chloe realized that her fears had been confirmed. It all happened the moment Andrea's sword pierced her body. Some completely unknown and incredible circumstances came into play. Chloe returned to the summer of 10 years ago. She wondered what awaited her now, whether she would be forced into an unwanted marriage again, and Andrea would kill her again. Will she really have to go through that suffering again, only to meet such a miserable end? No, she will never return to this hell again. Now she knows the future. Chloe forced herself to think, coming up with a way to use it now. She apologized to the maid for interrupting her endless flow of speeches and asked her to bring her a pen and a piece of paper she needed to write a letter of apology to the Viscount, the one who will help her get out of this hellish palace, the one who has not been touched by the influence of the royal family, but still has unlimited power. Chloe uses it to escape from the imperial palace, and revenge can be taken later. She had heard that he was ruthless, but she simply had no other choice. This man was the only one suitable for her purposes. Callias Rodrian, Prince of Ronheim, a kingdom that was defeated in the war and fell under the rule of the Empire. He was appointed ruler of the Empire to rule over those who refused to bow their heads. A man who despises the Empire more than anyone else and whose interests align with Chloe's. The princess wrote him a letter without indicating the sender's name. Callias assumed that something had happened while he was away. He opened the scroll and read that the sender of this letter had heard rumors that he had grown a beautiful moon garden in Ronheim. Callias was surprised that information about this place had leaked somewhere. The author of the letter indicated that she had heard that wonderful Rekna flowers were blooming in the moon gardens. She would like to see the flower-strewn field before everyone else. If Rodrian did not mind, she would reward him generously. She wrote that she loved flowers, but did not say who she was. But if he wants to know who she is, he can attend the Valentine's Day celebration that will take place at the Imperial Palace in a few days. It was hard to imagine who could write something like that. It doesn't matter, the truth will be revealed soon. Callias ordered everyone to take their posts and start reorganizing the exhibition they needed to speed up, because they were heading to the capital. Whoever she was, Callias was looking forward to meeting her. 2 days later, the Valentine's Day celebrations began. The day Chloe had been waiting for had finally arrived. She was extremely nervous about Callias Rodrian, the man on whom her entire plan literally rested. She didn't know if he would come after reading this letter. Even though she knew the future, for her, the infamous Mad Princess, he was the only salvation. There was no point in being afraid she couldn't do anything else anyway. Whenever fear of the future threatened to consume her, she remembered the last moments of her past life. She was beaten until she bled by her tyrant husband. The cold winter wind frostbite her cheeks. She learned the truth about her own mother's death. The faces of those who were to blame for all her troubles stood before her mind's eye. Chloe wanted revenge on those responsible for their deaths. True, Chloe told herself. She couldn't let this place weaken her resolve. Among the guests at the celebration, everyone noticed the arrival of Marquis Rodrian. He really looked very fierce. The rumors were true. Did he really come here in the hope of finding a lover after he lost the war and fell under the rule of the Empire? But still, everyone saw him standing there as if he were still the Prince of Ronheim that he once was, and this caused the people of the capital to look down on the uncouth barbarian, who were known to have neither shame nor conscience. It was said that the people of Ronheim ate people. Perhaps their former prince was here to choose his prey, and therefore everyone dreamed of him leaving as soon as possible. Many did not understand who he thought he was. Showing up at such an event, after all, he was nothing more than a puppet of the Empire. Callias suddenly looked at the gossips and said that if they wanted to tell him something, they could say it to his face. Callias immediately realized that the people's attitude towards him remained the same. If it weren't for that letter, which had greatly interested him, he wouldn't have set foot here. But it mentioned the moon garden and the Rekne flowers, and he couldn't turn a blind eye to that. A suspicious letter received not long ago, whoever the sender was. It seems he knows everything. During the day, the Rekne flowers look quite ordinary, but in the moonlight they turn golden, and in Ronheim they are often compared to gold. But there are no real Rekne flowers in the palace garden of Ronheim, so the letter spoke specifically about the Rekne flowers that grow in the moon garden. The man must have been referring to the recently discovered top-secret gold mine, the existence of which was known only to the Marquise's closest advisors. He was going to find out how this stranger knew about her. But even after all this, he could not guess who the sender was, but wasting time was unnecessary. He had to leave. Oh, look, I suddenly heard something nearby. Everyone noticed the appearance of that same crazy Princess Chloe. People were surprised that she was even allowed to walk around alone, because she could very well do something. The girl saw Callias and thought that here he is at last. Callias Rodrian actually came here because he read her letter. For the first time, he and Chloe looked into each other's eyes. In Chloe's past life, Andrea was persistently targeting Ronheim and the Marquis. He was always trying to get rid of him. Rodrian survived countless threats, but in the end, Andrea's plans led to his death. That's why Chloe chose the Marquis as an accomplice. There must be some reason why Andrea is so obsessed with him. If she finds out about this, Rodrian will cooperate with her. Andrea will wait until from now on, nothing will happen according to his plan. I'm glad to see you, Marquis, Chloe said with a smile as she approached Callias, thinking that this marriage would be the starting point for her new story. Chloe noticed the boutonniere on the Marquis's robe and said it was beautiful. There was no point in rushing things. First, she had to make sure that he had actually read her letter, so the girl asked the Marquis if she could get a flower from him. People heard what the Mad Princess said. They whispered about whether she even understood what such a gesture meant, but Chloe, of course, knew about it. Giving flowers on Valentine's Day meant giving your heart. That's why Chloe scheduled a meeting with Callias for that very day. Even if he rejects her, today is Valentine's Day, so everything that happens between a man and a woman is not in doubt. Everyone will think that this is just a stupid scandal between the Mad Princess and the barbarian Marquis. She was ready to beg him to give her this flower. Callias took the flower and unfastened it from his clothes. The Marquis knelt before Chloe and asked the princess to accept this flower from the moon garden. At the mention of the moon garden, the girl's eyes widened with excitement. If Rodrian mentioned this place, then he definitely read that letter of hers. She thanked him and explained that she simply adored flowers, especially Rekne flowers. They had always been her favorite. Before Andrea realized it, she and the Marquise needed to find somewhere private to talk, as there were too many stairs here, people discussing what a disfigurement it was and how the name Mad Princess suited Chloe. It was true, she was quite full of madness now. All these people must have wanted her to leave as soon as possible. She spoils everyone's mood with her presence. It was worth giving the Marquise a good reason, so Chloe ostentatiously stumbled and began wiping away her tears, lamenting that she was in too much pain. She could not get up. No one understood how she managed to trip, but the Empress and the Prince were supposed to take care of the madman, so there had to be someone who could help the girl, but most of the guests were disgusted even to touch her. God forbid you might catch an illness. The princess was treated worse than a clown. No one even tried to call a servant to help her. Callias thought he had no choice. He asked for forgiveness and permission to help Her Highness, and then picked up the girl in his arms. People whispered that it was so noble of him. The barbarian and the mad princess, they repeated, what a perfect couple. The moon in the sky was round and dazzlingly bright. Callias carried Chloe out into the silver-lit garden. Chloe thanked the Marquis with a laugh and said that she felt much better now that they were far enough away from the hall that they could drop the pretense. Callias admitted that he had not initially imagined that the sender was Her Highness, but upon seeing her, he realized the extent of his delusions. Callias said that he received an invitation from the princess. It was very interesting. He guessed that Chloe had set everything up just to meet him. She told him that she was glad that he understood everything so quickly. She made the right choice, and now she said that she was waiting for Marquis Rodrian. There was no longer any need to hide. The Marquis assumed that the princess had a good reason for summoning him in this way. He asked her directly what she wanted, and Chloe thought he looked impressive even in the ballroom, and in the darkness of the night, he seemed even more intimidating. But she had to tell him, for the sake of her own future, and so Chloe decisively told him about the deal. "Marry me, Marquis," said Chloe. She had to be brave. She also asked for that secret gold mine as a wedding gift. Callias couldn't believe she was serious. So the last thing he needed was a crazy princess as a wife, and she also demanded a recently discovered profitable mine to boot. It all sounded like nonsense. Chloe thought that everything was fine. The reaction was expected. She wouldn't even start such a conversation with the intention of backing down so easily, so she repeated her request to simply give her the mine. As someone who knew about the moon garden and its secrets, she might have some other information, and the Marquise should be curious to know about it. To make her into a crazy princess who couldn't do anything without him, Andrea always dragged her with him everywhere. She was always by his side wherever he went. But thanks to this, Chloe could see and hear things that were inaccessible to others. For example, she knew that, in fact, this mine did not produce any gold, and the Marquis was planning to sell it to Count Elvern. Callias was amazed that Chloe knew about this. The Marquis was not a fan of appearing at lavish events. This evening could be the girl's last opportunity to talk to him. Chloe said that this was only part of the information she had. The girl understood that she needed to remain calm and talk about something that could spark the Marquis's interest. Being the one who wanted to make a deal with the Marquise, Chloe had to assure him that marrying her would be a profitable deal for him. The girl asked permission to give him one piece of advice. She stated that handing over the mine to the Count was the worst possible option. She explained to the Marquis that if he did so, Ronheim would be covered in blood again. Marquis Rodrian intended to sell the mine to Count Elvern in order to obtain funds for the restoration of Ronheim, but this step of his became the spark that marked the beginning of a new fall of Ronheim, for which the Marquis himself will be to blame. Soon after, Count Elvern will hand over the mine to Andrea in order to secure the favor of the imperial family. Andrea's army will use the mine as a garrison and launch a surprise attack on Ronheim, and then these lands will be mired in blood again. Chloe said that Count Elvern may seem naive at first glance, but he is very cunning. He intends to offer this place to Andrea for use as a military camp. The Marquise, of course, might not believe her, but she heard the conversation with her own ears. This land was the only thread connecting Ronheim to the outside world. If it fell into Andrea's hands, there would no longer be any place in the empire inaccessible to the imperial family. Chloe had to prevent this at all costs. "Okay," said Callias. After listening to the girl, he needed to make sure that her words were true. He asked why Count Elvern was planning this. Chloe was glad that he showed interest in her story. She explained that in order to win the favor of Andrea, who would become the sole heir to the throne when Chloe was gone, he considered the Marquis an eyesore. The girl understood that it was normal that Callias was now skeptical. The fact that she was able to attract his attention was already a success. Callias said he had a feeling the prince didn't like him, but he found it hard to believe he was trying to get rid of his sister, the princess. The close connection between the two heirs was a well-known fact. Even a child would know about it. Chloe said that if the rumors were to be believed, they were as true as those that claimed she was crazy like her mother, and that the Marquis was a cannibal. Chloe asked if she had now proven her worth, and how the Marquis now felt about the idea of marriage. Callias noticed that the princess was not getting any benefit from this marriage, so he wondered why she was so eager to marry him. Chloe replied that she just wanted to leave this place because she knew that Callias was capable of taking her away from here to the ends of the earth. "Your Highness, where are you?" The maid's voice reached them. Chloe realized with annoyance that they had already woken up and were looking for her. The girl told Callias that if he decided to make this deal with her, he should come and visit her tomorrow. She will wait for him, but now it's time for her to leave. The Marquis was left alone in the garden. He heard only the voice of the maid calling her Highness. A man ran up to Callias and explained that they had heard that the prince and princess had disappeared somewhere, so they went to look for him. Callias reminded them that he had asked them not to call him prince because they could get into serious trouble if the imperial palace found out about this. The young man, Alex, apologized for his mistake and promised to be more careful in the future. Callias said that this was the end of their business here, so they could return. There was nothing more to do here. Alex pointed out to the gentleman that the exit was on the other side of the garden, and then asked if Callias had forgotten anything there. Callias thought that Chloe hadn't changed at all since their childhood. He remembered her well like this. Callias went to his mansion. He needed to make sure that everything was in place. He turned to his assistants and asked if anyone had spoken to outsiders about the moon garden. One of the assistants replied that they were knights who had sworn allegiance to him and Ronheim, and they would never speak of Ronheim's affairs to outsiders, especially not to the imperial bastards. Callias himself believed that the likelihood that it was their doing was negligible, but he still didn't understand how Chloe had found out about it back then. He thought that perhaps he would be able to find out the details of all this when he got closer to the princess. It seems Chloe had her own circumstances for all of this. However, Callias was surprised that the girl did not recognize him. He asked her permission to ask her one last question. It was important for him to understand why she so wanted to take over the mine. Chloe replied that she needed it to grow a flower garden. She had already told him that she was crazy about flowers. The assistant asked Callias if they should dig deeper. Callias noticed that the princess still seemed to love flowers. Therefore, he must visit her personally with a bouquet in his hands. Chloe sat quietly in her room while the maid combed her hair. Chloe thought she had done all she could last night. All that was left was to wait for the Marquis to appear. Marquis Rodrian will definitely come to her. He will never allow his home, which he guards like the apple of his eye, to become a battlefield again. The problem could be Andrea. He heard the news about what happened yesterday, so he will show up any minute. The maid reprimanded Chloe. She was fidgeting all the time. This was preventing the maid from doing her hair, and she really wanted to finish as quickly as possible and leave, so the princess needed to sit still. The maid reproached Chloe for receiving a scolding because the princess decided to leave the banquet of her own free will. Chloe muttered an apology. The maid asked why she was doing something that she had to apologize for, and Chloe suddenly wondered why she had even said that, since she hadn't done anything wrong, nothing that she should apologize for. Chloe told herself to pull herself together because she decided to build her own life. She told the maid that if she was so busy, she could leave right now. And for her to call another maid, she would no longer apologize for things that were not her fault. Chloe repeated to the girl that she could leave, and she would explain to the others that the maid had left because she was very busy. The princess remembered the girl the empress had assigned to her. After the death of Chloe's mother, all those who had been with her since childhood were driven out and replaced by new people appointed by the empress, each of whom treated Chloe with disdain. The maid said that everyone was busy and there was no one to replace her. She admitted that she was wrong and told the princess to turn to face the mirror. She didn't understand what had suddenly come over Her Highness, and Chloe thought that this is how people change, step by step. "Chloe!" Andrea cried, bursting into his sister's chambers. He wanted to know how she dared to leave the banquet with Marquis Rodrian, what it all meant. Andrea shouted out whether his sister was in her right mind, since she was about to get engaged. Chloe looked thoughtfully at the man who had once been her beloved brother. The very thought of him caused fear. He said that he was unbearably ashamed of Chloe. He could not even go out in public. Seeing his face turn crimson and him spewing out harsh words, unable to control his own emotions, Chloe gained confidence. "Hello, brother," said Chloe. She was no longer afraid of him. "Chloe?" Andrea said, asking if she thought now was the right time for polite greetings. Andrea thought that dealing with this fool was always such a headache. He said that he was shocked by Chloe's insistence on attending the ball, but he was even more shocked by the news that the princess left there with Marquis Rodrian. Andrea asked why Chloe suddenly became so careless when he spoke like that in his past life. The girl thought that this was how he showed concern for her. She believed everything he told her. Now her brother has stated that it seems that her illness is progressing. Andrea said he was afraid it was hereditary, and then asked the girl if she was really okay. Every time he tried to humiliate Chloe, he brought up her mother, and now that she knew the whole truth, it was harder than ever for her to swallow his words, but she had no right to break down now. She mentally told herself to control herself and not to fall for provocations, but out loud she said that she hadn't been to a ball for so long that she was afraid to go alone. "Forgive me, brother," Chloe said. "Okay," Andrea replied. He said that from now on there is no need to force yourself to attend such events. He held out his hands to Chloe and assured her that she always came first for him, and she thought he was lying when he convinced her of this. Andrea said that very soon Chloe would get married and leave the imperial palace. He expressed hope that she would have time to enjoy comfort. Chloe thought that yes, that must have been his true intentions, and Andrea said that this arrogant Marquis Rodrian dared to tarnish her name, so her brother could now not contain his rage. Chloe needed to live as quiet as a mouse until she married the Viscount. Andrea said that he had already spoken to Viscount Pellis, and he said that he would not hold a grudge against his bride for such a minor oversight. Chloe thought she would have preferred the Viscount to consider the incident as a reason to break off the engagement. "Oh, Chloe, don't be mistaken," Andrea said. He assured her that he was only saying all this because he cared about her, and she knew it herself. Chloe could barely keep from recoiling in disgust, and Andrea said he would make sure that the scoundrel never came near her again. "Your Highness?" the man who opened the door called loudly. Andrea asked what had happened, and the man replied that it was the Marquise Rodriana. Marquis Rodrian requested an audience with Her Highness the Princess, and Chloe was delighted that Callias had arrived. She did tell him that if he decided to make a deal with her, he should visit her the next day. This meant that he had come to make a deal. "Greetings to their Highnesses the Princess and the Prince," said the Marquis as he entered. Andrea asked what brought him here. Callias said that the time spent apart from the princess dragged on unbearably long. He apologized for his rudeness, and Andrea said that the visit was too unexpected, so it would be better for Marquise Rodrian to come another day. Chloe thought he was going to send the Marquis away. She couldn't let Andrea take away from her the opportunity she had fought for so long. She approached her brother and said that it was she who had invited Marquis Rodrian, since he had helped her at the ball yesterday, and she wanted to treat him to tea. Chloe happily asked the Marquis to confirm this. Callias assured that Her Highness's words were absolutely true. Andrea said that his sister caused them problems last night. He thought that it seemed that nothing could be done about it and asked permission to take his leave. He had plans for what to do after that. He wanted to talk to each of them alone after all. His sister was already engaged. "Enjoy your time together," Andrea said as he left. "I'm sorry, Marquis," Chloe said. She was lucky Andrea had backed off so calmly. She had almost lost her opportunity. "Would you like to go for a walk?" she asked. The two of them went out into the garden and strolled along its sunny alleys. The maids followed closely behind the princess, but at such a distance it would have been difficult for them to eavesdrop on the conversation. Chloe turned to the Marquis and realized that he had somehow managed to get closer to her. His gaze was very serious. She asked if his visit meant that he had decided to accept her proposal. Callias said that yes, he believed that this marriage would be very beneficial for him. Now he wanted to hear the princess's plan. Chloe supposed that he might have already guessed after hearing Andrea's words, but first she would need to break off her engagement to Viscount Pelsis. Callias said he would handle it. Chloe didn't have to bother. Chloe was delighted to realize that he had answered without hesitation. Apparently, he had something significant that would allow him to break off the engagement. Callias asked if Her Highness was absolutely all right. She asked what he meant. Chloe was confused as to why he was looking at her like that. He asked if she really wanted to marry a man from Ronheim, and he looked genuinely concerned. Callias explained that once the princess got there, she would have to face difficulties she could never have imagined, and he doubted that she would be able to endure such a harsh life. People say a lot of nasty things behind his back. Rumors will spread about his wife, too. Chloe could feel it even without words. It was not a warning. Callias was genuinely worried about her. "No, Chloe, pull yourself together," the girl thought. No one ever cared about her. He says this only so that in the future she does not create problems for him. After the betrayal, it was simply pathetic to continue to believe in human kindness. "It didn't matter," Chloe said firmly. She would leave for Ronheim right now if she had the chance. "If you so wish, Princess," replied Callias. He assured Chloe that he would quickly solve the problem and return to her, his future bride. Andrea walked down the hallway in a rage, cursing Chloe, wondering when she had become so bold as to speak to him, looking him straight in the eye, even inviting guests without his permission, and of all people she had dared to invite this Callias. "Your Highness, please wait," said one of the warriors. "Out of the way," Andrea growled, not even thinking about stopping. He burst into the room, ignoring the security. "My God, Andrea, what kind of bad manners is this?" asked Mrs. Kavala. "Mother," Andrea shouted and started complaining about Chloe, calling her a stupid girl. Kavala told him to speak such things more quietly, because there were many extra ears around. When the strangers left her chambers, Kavala asked why he burst into her room and disturbed her peace. Andrea replied that Chloe was acting strangely. Previously, she obeyed her every word, but now she dared to defend Marquis Rodrian in front of him. This news surprised Kavala. She asked if Rodrian and Chloe were close. Andrea said he was afraid the Viscount might break off the engagement because of this, but he was still too useful to lose. "I know," said Kavala. She asked Andrea not to worry. She had a solution to this problem. "Marry not me, Marquise, and give me a gold mine as a wedding gift," said Chloe, who turned out to be the one who sent the letter and knew a suspicious amount about Ronheim. This fact was astonishing in itself, but there was something even more astonishing. Chloe did not know that the mine had been discovered. She shouldn't have known, but she even knew about her condition and the plan to sell it to the Count. She said that the mine wasn't producing gold, that the Marquis was planning to sell it to Count Elvern. How could Chloe know about all this? Where could she get such information? Callias had quite a lot of questions, but one thing was absolutely clear. At this point, Chloe was more desperate than anyone. She said that it didn't matter, that if it were up to her, she would leave for Ronheim right now. "She is not even bothered by the fact that her future husband is a native of Ronheim," proclaimed a barbarian. Callias wanted to know what Chloe had been through to ask him, a man she didn't even remember, for this favor. The first meeting took place 12 years ago. At that time, Ronheim was captured by people eager to get their hands on the relic. The saint who protected the artifact was Callias's mother. She died right in his arms. The identities of the invaders were still unknown. He was going to kill them with his own hands. It was no secret that Kavala, the Oriental Empress and Black Mage, had an interest in the Ronheim relic. So he infiltrated the Imperial Palace to take revenge, but his body was already exhausted from the long journey to Arental, and to make matters worse, he was gradually losing hope as he wandered through the endless, labyrinth-like corridors. Then he met this girl and she asked who he was. He thought he had been caught, but the girl said that you don't see people here that often. The girl still seemed so young and innocent, so Callias decided to try to think of something. He lied to her that he came here with his parents and then got lost. It might have sounded too ridiculous, but the girl said it was okay and offered to walk him to the exit. She believed Callias's story so easily that he found it suspicious. Maybe she just wanted to take him to the guards. He needed to find some way to escape. While they walked side by side, the girl chatted. She liked Callias's clothes, although it seemed strange to her. He explained that in their country, most people wear like that. "Hey, your stomach is growling," the girl said. She offered him strawberry-flavored candies. Callias felt embarrassed that she noticed. He had unconsciously succumbed to the influence of this little girl, but now he needed to somehow get out of here as quickly as possible. Come to think of it, he didn't even know her name, but as soon as he asked, she immediately introduced herself, asking in return what his name was. Looking back, Callias realized that he might have given in to her soft gaze and smile. He lost his composure and almost told her his real name, and then he simply didn't finish. It sounded like his name was Call, and Chloe even thought she heard it wrong at first, but Callias confirmed that it was true. And then fate brought him together with the reason for the hatred that had flared up within him. He finally met her, Kavala, and at that moment he realized that he had begun to hesitate without realizing it. He was sure that this was the woman who passed by. All he needed was to attack her from behind, but if he didn't succeed, he would die a dog's death. Chloe didn't give him time to think about it. She held him back. Kavala didn't notice them, although she heard some voice. Her companion assumed it was the wind, since the window was open. Chloe and Callias hid in the hiding place, and the girl told him that if he waved the blade, the guards would grab him. She asked him to stop. She was afraid of losing her first friend. Chloe said that she knew everything. The story about the boy coming here with his parents was a lie, but she was still going to help him get out of here. Ultimately, the little girl's genuine concern derailed the revenge plan, with Chloe saying she knew nothing about Call's situation, but he had to move on for the sake of his future. Callias had no choice but to listen to her, as she said if he died, the death of his older brothers would be in vain. Callias felt like a terrible coward. So he got out of the palace, and on the day of their separation, he and Chloe promised to meet each other when they grew up. Perhaps it was a promise that they would live safely until that moment. So Callias eagerly awaited the day of the promised meeting. There were false rumors about Chloe that she had gone crazy. They were clearly going to isolate and kill her like the Empress. Callias has owed Chloe his life since their childhood, and he needs to finish the plan to avenge his older brothers that he still hasn't put into action. First, we need to save Chloe before Kavala destroys her with her own hands. There was a knock on the door and a man entered. Callias asked if everyone was coping with the tasks assigned. Callias's aide, Viscount Brantian Cliff, responded that they were spreading rumors, mainly in the criminal underworld, rumors that Marcus Rodrian knew of the key to the relic. "Excellent," said the Marquis, and ordered a little more effort to be put in. Brantian said that this rumor could complicate the task of finding the artifact. Everyone will be trying to find the relic that was rumored to have disappeared. If Kavala hears about this, she won't sit still. Either she has received the Ronheim relic, but hasn't got hold of the key needed to use it. Callias replied that in any case, if you add a couple of rumors to the existing ones, the situation will not change much. Brantian said he didn't want to interfere with the plan. But as an old friend of Callias, he must express his opinion on this matter. Brantian didn't understand why Callias thought it wouldn't make a difference, when it was obvious he was being used as bait and would end up in danger. He couldn't read his friend's thoughts, but he asked him not to risk it because he didn't want to lose him too. Callias said the evidence so far had been circumstantial, so he was being cautious. But now, with the help of this operation, he will be able to make sure that the relic is in Kavala's hands. If this is true, she will not leave everything like this. Callias told his friend not to worry. The Empress would not be able to harm him until she found the key. She will most likely appoint a spy. "Hey, newbie," came a voice from the window on the night street. "You don't know how the relic that the saint has works. Ask the people they met in the tavern. They were knights of Ronheim. They discussed that in order to awaken the relic, a key is needed. Only one person in all of Ronheim knows what it looks like. That person is Marquis Rodrian. He is different, as befits the son of a saint." This rumor had to be conveyed to Empress Kavala. That key, Marquis Rodrian, it all sounded like it wasn't true. Kavala happily asked if this meant the rumor was true. Now everything was clear. She had to steal the key from him, even if it means killing Callias Rodrian. Chloe woke up in her bed feeling unrefreshed. Today she was unable to sleep normally again. She hadn't slept properly since she returned to the past. When she closed her eyes, the memories of the moment of her death came crashing down on her like a wave. And she sinks without resistance into this pitch-black abyss. But this is not what is truly frightening. There is only one question that worries me. Chloe didn't understand why she had been so stupid, why she hadn't even suspected. The blame for this lay entirely with her. It was impossible to get rid of the feeling of helplessness and pride. At such moments, one person saved her, her old friend who never grew up. "Chloe, I'm here," he said. This boy's name was Call. That's weird. He should be here by now. He called out to her. He asked if it was true that she was getting married soon, and Chloe replied that it was an unexpected event, but such was fate. She was sure that he would be surprised when he saw her groom. He looked very much like him. He was the same friend who, since their first meeting, had been secretly entering the palace through a passage known only to him, just to keep him company. She told him that the most important thing was that she wanted to marry this man, and therefore he had nothing to worry about. Chloe thought that it didn't matter that these meetings were secret and fleeting. She was terribly sad that they would be far from each other. In her past life, she at least lived near the capital, so she could at least see him sometimes. She told him that Ronheim was far away from here. No one knew when they would meet again. Call consoled her, assuring her that she didn't need to worry about it. Wherever she went, he would always be with her. Call was the only one who stayed by her side and was there until the moment of her death. It was true that he would always come to her wherever she was, which was why she had relied on him until now. To be honest, she didn't have the slightest idea how her future life would turn out. It was so stupid, because this life was not her first. "Chloe," Call said, breaking her out of her thoughts. Call said that no matter what problems arose in the future, she shouldn't blame herself. He might not have known the whole situation, but he knew Chloe better than anyone else, and none of what had happened recently was her fault. He asked her to believe in herself and reminded her that she was much more capable than she thought. Chloe was very grateful to him, right? She would believe in herself, and she also believed in Call, who had been looking after her all this time. Call said that Chloe should not forget that no matter how fierce the snowstorm was, it would eventually subside. "My God, Your Highness, you're awake," Chloe heard. People were paying attention to her gait, saying that she must be in seventh heaven at the thought of her imminent marriage. In her past life, Chloe would have shuddered at their ridicule, but now she could stand up for herself. They said it was very generous of them to forgive their fiancé for meeting the barbarian, and Chloe thought she would have to endure this gossip to make Andrea lower his guard. The maid said that it seemed that the Viscount was crazy about the princess, and this barbarian brazenly sent letters knowing about their relationship. It was so childish. Chloe approached the maids to ask about the letters the Marquis had sent. She didn't know that Rodrian had sent a letter. The maid replied that he dared to send a letter to Her Highness. They knew nothing about its contents, so they simply sent it back. He was always too worried about the princess. Chloe realized exactly how Andrea controlled her. Hurried footsteps were heard. "Chloe!" Andrea shouted as he ran in. He said that this Marquis Rodrian is a terribly rude bastard. After reading the letter, Andrea could not sit idle. It was written there that Princess Chloe was a girl more dazzling than the midday sun and brighter than the stars that shine in the night. Having seen her for the first time at the celebration in the palace a couple of days ago, it was impossible to forget that particularly beautiful night. The Marquis wrote that, recalling that evening, he understood that all the amazing things, the silvery trees, flowers, and the fresh, gentle wind were harbingers of this fateful meeting. The moment their eyes met, he suddenly felt his soul begin to burn, and he still feels it to this day. Chloe didn't understand what the Marquis was thinking when he sent such a letter. Andrea said that his unexpected visit was already a very rude act on his part, but sending such a vulgar letter to a girl who had a fiancé was too much. Andrea exclaimed that there was a limit to everything. He simply would not allow this to continue. And the gift sent with the letter, a few pitiful flowers, what a tangible contrast with Viscount Pelsis, who always presented the bride with the finest jewels. If this were a past life, Chloe would already be numb from Andrea's words and worried about whether she had disgraced the imperial family. However, she remembered Call's words that she was not guilty of anything. Now she was no longer going to live like this. Andrea said that she shouldn't cry and blame herself. But the girl replied that her brother was right in everything. This made Andrea happy. He said that he always knew that Chloe understood his feelings. Everything he said was for her good. Chloe said she had to get rid of all the unimportant things. Andrea looked at her with incomprehension. Chloe asked the maid if the bouquet in her hands was sent by Marquis Rodrian. Chloe snatched the flowers from the maid's hands and declared that she felt she had the right to throw them away herself. The maid asked Her Highness to be careful because the vase was so unstable. "Chloe," Andrea said. "Sorry, brother," Chloe said, dropping the flowers and explaining that her hand had slipped. Andrea screamed that there was blood on her face. He ordered the maids to hurry and give her first aid. Chloe thought that she would not allow Andrea to humiliate her again. At this time, Kavala sat thoughtfully in front of the table. "Andrea has been showing up here more and more often lately." He complained that something was wrong with Chloe, that she had become a completely different person. It was an interesting thought. They would soon see how much of a different person she had become. "Come in," said Kavala. "You called me," Chloe said, appearing in the doorway. "My dear Chloe," Kavala addressed the girl affectionately and said that she had a very important task for her. She said that Marquis Rodrian had offered her his hand and heart. She should go with him to Ronheim. These words shocked Chloe. She thought that Kavala had called her about the incident that happened earlier. She did not understand what Kavala was planning, out of the blue ordering her to go with the Marquis to Ronheim. Chloe asked if Kavala wanted to marry her to the Marquis, and Kavala replied that the girl had absolutely nothing to worry about. She was not going there forever. She would only be there as a scout. Chloe didn't understand what she was talking about. Kavala explained that it was all for the sake of peace between Ronheim and the Oriental Empire. Kavala said that Chloe understood this too. The bastards from Ronheim were living so well only because they became a vassal state of the empire, but she had heard rumors that they were preparing for war in secret. So Chloe will have to become a peacemaker by marrying the Marquise and prevent the war. She will just need to keep an eye on him and report everything so that he does not create problems. Kavala asked if Chloe could do it and called her baby girl. Chloe didn't even believe that everything could go so smoothly. She was racking her brains over how to break off the engagement, but they themselves decided to marry her off to the Marquis. Chloe babbled that she didn't know if she could handle such a thing, but for her mother she would do anything. Kavala thanked her and asked for forgiveness. She hugged her and said that her mother would bring her back. She just had to wait a little while. Chloe thought that even such a warm touch could be poisonous. If she had not returned to the past, her suspicions would never have fallen on Kavala. Chloe asked if she could ask her mother for just one favor. She wanted to get the woman into her own trap. Later, Kavala's brother asked if she really intended to send the princess to Ronheim, and she replied that there was nothing better than attaching her own man to the Marquise. He asked if the princess was sure she was capable of carrying out the task. Kavala said that the fool was only capable of trembling with fear, so she would entrust it to Chloe. Kavala remembered that the princess seemed to have asked for a favor. She needed a merchant guild and land as a wedding gift. But not just any land, but the most useless one that was in the possession of the late empress, and barren land, which can be considered as a final gift, and then it will not be a waste of resources. In the end, when the girl has completed her mission, she will disappear on that very empty land. After the confidential audience with Kavala, talk of marriage with Rodrian increased, although Viscount Pelsis and Andrea tried to prevent it. Since this marriage agreement was encouraged by the emperor's wife, Kavala, their protests did not last long, as the day of Chloe's engagement to the Marquis soon arrived. The mad princess and the ruthless barbarian were just the perfect couple. Chloe's maid thought that if she were in her place, it would be too humiliating for her to go out in public, but the princess, most likely, simply did not know anything about the feeling of shame. Chloe thought that this ceremony was proof that she had already managed to influence the future, so even the ridicule of everyone around her was honey to her ears. And also, now that Kavala has granted Chloe the Sagid Merchant Guild and the Rosendahl territory, as soon as she arrives in Ronheim, she will begin searching for that boy. The engagement threw Andrea off balance, but she couldn't let her guard down, because this was only the beginning. The people of Ronheim worried Chloe much more. They were outraged that the princess had thrown away the vase given to them by their lord. They did not understand what the Marquis was hoping for. No matter how poor his people were, marrying a member of the imperial family was too much. A native of the empire aroused hostility among the people of Ronheim. Even lowering taxes won't satisfy the people, especially if they see that this mad princess is so well-mannered. They wanted to see what kind of nobility she would show today. Chloe thought that their disdain was quite justified, but today she was not going to give up on the planned alliance. She told herself to put aside her panic and walk forward slowly. When the arrival of Her Highness Princess Chloe Idelian was announced, she thought she just needed to be patient for a little while, and freedom would be in her hands. The path to a new life that she was paving herself was already just a few steps away. During betrothal ceremonies, Imperials typically demonstrate their prestige. The number of vassals allowed to walk alongside the couple reflects the imperial attitude towards the imperial. Chloe was forced to walk alone along the red carpet, flanked on either side by knights from Ronheim and the Oriental Empire, an attempt to destroy the remains of her dignity. In her past life, Chloe was so worried that it felt like a weight had been lifted off her shoulders when the Viscount appeared, so she didn't even have time to think about her humiliating situation. This time, Chloe noticed Andrea. She had heard that Viscount Pelsis had withdrawn his support after his engagement to Chloe had been called off, so it was understandable why Andrea couldn't hide her displeasure now. It didn't matter much to Chloe, since marriage to him had been forced upon her from the start, and with Mr. Rodrian arriving soon, she had to concentrate on making sure the ceremony went smoothly. "You're walking too slowly, Chloe." How many years? How many winters, father, she thought. The last time they saw him was on the day of her engagement in a past life. If not for the gray hair and the imperial throne, she would not have recognized him. Chloe bowed and apologized for being late. Her father didn't listen to the rest of what she was trying to say. He just told her to hurry up. Her own father treated her like a stranger. Chloe also bowed to Kavala, who couldn't hide her delight that her plans were bearing fruit, saying that Chloe looked absolutely dazzling today. And the people gathered to watch how the mentally ill princess was married to a barbarian. Chloe thanked Her Majesty, even though she felt the ridicule and hostile glances burning through her. Kavala said that Chloe didn't have to address her by her formal title, she could still call her mother. Chloe was glad that the Marquise wasn't seeing this performance. She was fine, as always. She could handle it alone. And then she heard Mr. Rodrian being called. It wasn't his turn yet, but he walked in, and Chloe turned around impulsively at the sound of his footsteps. The Marquis appeared accompanied by his vassals. The Master of Ceremonies announced the arrival of the Knights of Ronheim and about the appearance of His Excellency Marquis Callius Rodrian. People were whispering that the Marquis had appeared too early and that he shouldn't have come out now, but Chloe had no more doubts. When someone is next to you, it becomes easier to breathe. "Greetings to the Idelian imperial family," said the Marquis. Then he turned to Chloe and said that it was an honor for him to serve such a valuable person as the princess, his excessive praise greatly flattering the girl. The Marquis said that, according to imperial standards, there should have been a much larger escort, and he asked Her Highness to forgive him for the meager number of vassals who accompanied him to the capital. Chloe thought that he had gone so far for her, the Marquis acted like a man absolutely bewitched by love. The Emperor noted the Marquis's rather large retinue. Chloe thought he was upset that Ronheim ignored his wishes. If he made a fuss, things could end badly. "Marquis Rodrian," said Kavala. She said they were pleased to see him show such courtesy to their beloved princess. Since the Marquis had already arrived, the ceremony could have continued, but Kavala had intervened on purpose, and Chloe would like to understand why. Kavala would first like to thank the distinguished guests for gathering here today to witness the formation of this union. She told Chloe to declare in front of everyone whether she would willingly marry Marquis Rodrian, and Chloe replied that she would. Now it was the Marquis's turn, and as expected, despite the fact that he had come here, it must be difficult for him to accept Chloe. "If you have no doubts, Marquis, declare before everyone that you are ready to sign the marriage contract of your own free will." It sounded again. Although it was a marriage of convenience, for the Marquis it was most likely unexpected and forced, so it was not surprising that he was unhappy. Chloe knew it all when she chose this path. Even without his recognition and respect, she could handle everything. That was enough. The Marquis suddenly turned to the bride and dropped to one knee before her. "Chloe Idelian," he said. And then he said that he loved her from the day they first met. He vowed to be with her until his last breath. Chloe didn't understand at all what was happening now. She reflexively pulled away. There must have been a misunderstanding. She would explain everything to him later. But was he always like this? Kavala noticed that the Marquis was a very passionate man. A smile played on her lips. She solemnly declared the engagement complete. The Marquis asked permission to express his gratitude to all the distinguished guests present today. Whatever the reason, Chloe was grateful to the Marquis for his acting, and the ceremony was a success. He noticed that the princess looked worried. "No matter how fierce the snowstorm is, it will eventually subside," Callias said, sounding very much like Chloe's friend. He said that Chloe could rest easy. She crossed paths with him for a moment. It was a strange feeling, as if he was supporting her, but why did he have to say that? The guests discussed many things. The face of the Emperor's wife seemed young enough to them to confuse her with her son's peers. Black magic must have been involved. Brantian ordered his men to stop gossiping and check that everything was in place. Callias looked at his own hand thoughtfully. The embarrassment that washed over him when he touched Chloe's cheek was not her real aura. She looked completely uninformed. At that moment, Chloe picked up a bracelet that someone had dropped in the park, but Callias felt it clearly. Chloe was cursed with death. The Knights of Ronheim were talking among themselves. One asked the other if he had found his missing item, and he replied that he had not yet, but was planning to make one more round before leaving. His comrade said that they would then go first, and he would catch up with them. This warrior, Alex, was irritated. He did not understand how it was possible to lose Flatus, how everything always went wrong. At that moment, someone called him out, calling him Sir, but there was no one in that place to call him that. Alex turned around and saw Her Highness, who was glad that he had not left yet. He bowed and thought that he should not cause the prince any trouble. It was a mistake on his part. The princess said that it was okay, she just found a bracelet lying on the ground nearby. She thought it might belong to one of the Ronheim knights. Alex was delighted because this bracelet was his lost flatus. This item was a prayer entrusted to a valued person. It was a Ronheim tradition to give bracelets with prayers for happiness, safety, and good luck. Alex asked if Her Highness had really come all this way just to give him a bracelet that, for the princess from Arenthal, should have looked no more expensive than a trinket. Chloe replied that she thought it was valuable, especially since her friend had the same one, so she wanted to return it to its owner. Alex remembered that people were saying that the Arental princess was sick, but this girl looked quite sane. Alex replied that it was true, this thing was very dear to him. He was sincerely grateful to Her Highness. "Your Highness, where are you?" a voice rang out. Chloe said she had to go and said goodbye. Alex thought about the princess's words about her friend having a similar bracelet in the Empire. Bracelets made of colored threads were considered a sign of poverty, so that meant that her friend was from Ronheim. No, that simply couldn't happen. Alex looked back before mounting his saddle. He thought that he had found himself in debt to the princess without wanting to. "Your Highness," Chloe heard. The maid asked if she even understood what these people could do to her. The maid claimed they were incredibly cruel, and Chloe thought the girl was incredibly loud. Why did she tell her such things when Chloe would soon leave them? She doesn't respect her at all. Even the knights from Ronheim were much better. At least they were open towards the princess. Chloe remembered the knight who was so sincerely happy to find his missing person. She thought that, on the other hand, it was so nice to see such honesty, which the knights had much more of than the servants of the imperial palace. Then Chloe thought about the bracelet. It was very similar to the one Kal wore, meaning it was a traditional decoration of Ronheim. Kala's bracelet could also have been a flatus, especially since it had the same design as Ronheim. Come to think of it, his words had taken Chloe by surprise when he said that no matter how fierce the snowstorm was, it would eventually subside. In Arenthal, the weather is always favorable. Such a phenomenon as a blizzard is unknown here. Chloe was previously sure that Kal was a native of the Arenthal Empire, but today she realized that he could also be a native of Ronheim. Even though he had helped her countless times, Chloe had never tried to find out more about him. She should ask him the next time they met. Several days had passed since the engagement ceremony, and everyone in the imperial palace was busy preparing for the wedding, all for the sake of the marquise, who said that they needed to return to Ronheim as soon as possible. But it's all in vain. The wedding will never take place anyway. Chloe still remembered the displeasure on the Viscount's face when he was told that the wedding was cancelled and the ceremony was ultimately held separately. But what other choice was there, after all? The emperor suffered as a result of a fall from his horse. Due to this, he suffered a serious injury, and Kavala was absorbed in caring for him. It is not surprising that due to the confusion, the wedding was cancelled. Kavala will leave her palace to look after the emperor. Chloe has been waiting for this moment for a long time. After seeing the Marquise's subordinates on the day of her engagement, she realized how important it was to win their favor in order to live peacefully in Ronheim. The surest way was to help them rebuild the state, so Chloe planned to steal Kavala's jewelry and leave for Ronheim as quickly as possible. But Chloe only vaguely remembered that the emperor had fallen from his horse, and she didn't know the exact date, so all she could do was wait and see. And these rumors began to spread throughout the palace, and everyone was discussing what had happened. His Majesty fell from his horse while hunting, the servants said, which meant that this day was today. Today, on this fateful night, Kavala will begin her vigil at the emperor's bedside. She will look after him from dusk till dawn. And when the empress's palace is left unguarded, a thief will break in, and from tomorrow the security around her palace will be doubled. This meant that today was the only chance to steal the empress's jewels. Hidden in a box, it was locked with a special magical lock. So even if the thief got there before Chloe, there was no need to worry about him taking the contents. Only 3 people know about this key. One of them was Kavala, its current owner. The second was Chloe's mother, his former owner, and from her Chloe herself inherited the knowledge of the treasury and the key. At first glance, it looks like an ordinary trinket carved in the shape of a dice. No one would ever have guessed that this was the key to the box. Therefore, Kavala will most likely place it in a prominent place without any qualms. She had no idea that Chloe knew her secret. Chloe breathed a sigh of relief. She thought that Kavala shouldn't be too upset with her. After all, she just wants to take back what belongs to her. Finally, that very night came. Chloe approached the right place and noted that the guards turned out to be much more irresponsible than she expected. It seemed like everyone had gone with Kavala to the Imperial Palace, so Chloe only needed to get to the right room. The girl noticed movement in the window. Someone was trying to open the window. If she could manage to slip through the crack he left open, Chloe would be very lucky. Chloe saw this person, a woman. She could see red wavy hair. She had seen them before in wanted posters. It was the thief who had set her sights on Kavala's box. Dark skin and red curly hair, that was the description on the wanted poster. Chloe thought that if this girl had just left the Empress's palace, this means that the guards will be here any minute. Her suspicions were confirmed. Everyone was already looking for where the thief had hidden. But if Chloe runs away now, she will lose her only chance to steal the box. She simply had no other choice but to act according to the backup plan. If she reveals herself and enters the Empress's palace, she may not get what she wants, but she will grab a couple of jewels. She will later fall under suspicion, but it is better than missing the chance. Suddenly, Chloe heard some sound and realized that the girl was running towards her. Get out!" Chloe screamed, covering herself with her hands. She screamed that there was a thief, and suddenly handcuffs snapped onto her wrists as a stranger put them on her. The red-haired girl screamed for everyone to run here. The woman is trying to escape. Chloe suddenly realized that they were trying to set her up. The guards shouted that they had to seize her and not let her escape. The red-haired thief screamed for everyone to run here. She saw the fugitive hiding in the bushes. When the guards surrounded them, Chloe thought that this was some kind of absurdity, even though her reputation in the palace left much to be desired, but she still held the title of princess. When they saw her face, they would understand everything. It would have been better if she had just run away, Chloe thought, throwing the hood back from her face. Maybe they just didn't recognize her. This thief makes a grave mistake by trying to frame her without first knowing who she is, because she was Crown Princess Chloe Adelian. When she is released, she will simply say that she came to see Kavala. Once she had been exposed, she would only take those jewels whose loss no one would notice, and now she loudly ordered that she be released. But the guard grabbed her roughly and shouted that she could not and did not dare, being an ordinary servant, to defame the name of Her Highness by pronouncing it with her dirty mouth. Chloe didn't understand why she was called a servant. Even though she was a despised princess, no one dared to treat her like that. Chloe was outraged that the palace guards were unable to identify a member of the imperial family, and she ordered that she be released immediately. Suddenly, a strange thought came to her mind, and she looked at her own reflection in the window glass. A red-haired girl with green eyes was looking at her. It was that same red-haired thief. Chloe thought that in that moment, before calling the guards, the stranger cast a spell on her. This meant that she was no ordinary thief. Who could she be, Chloe wondered, while the guards were deciding how to deal with her quietly, so as not to attract attention with noise. "Yes, sir," Chloe heard. She began to lose consciousness, the cold enveloping her body. Then she smelled a strange smell. She didn't understand where she was. Chloe felt the hard, cold floor in front of her, as if she were in a bathroom. Had they really decided to lock her here and not in a dungeon? Chloe didn't understand why all this had happened, unless Kavala had somehow found out about her plan. But in the reflection, there was still a red-haired stranger. Chloe thought that maybe it was the handcuffs the thief had put on her that were the cause. The place where Chloe now found herself looked like a bathroom in the Empress's palace. It was unclear why. If the magic had not yet dissipated, they locked the wanted thief here. The scent of the candles was so strong that it gave Chloe a headache, and she could barely smell the blood. Then Chloe noticed the knives. It was all terribly suspicious. At least she was in Kavala Castle, so it wasn't all that bad. Besides, Chloe's identity and purpose were still not revealed. If everyone thought she was a servant, she could do whatever she wanted since she was in that girl's body. But first, it was necessary to get rid of everything that restricted movement. Then you need to steal Kavala's jewels and escape safely. In order to do this, Chloe had to remove the spell from herself. There were only candles and knives around her. She saw nothing else that could be useful to her. Suddenly, a bottle of oil caught her eye. Yes, that should have definitely worked. With the help of oil, Chloe managed to remove her handcuffs. She thought that the magic would immediately dissipate if she got rid of them. Thanks to the fact that recently they had been watching her even while drinking, she had become thin. The handcuffs slipped off easily. Now that she could move freely, it was time to act. Judging by the fact that it was still dark outside, not much time had passed. Chloe needed to get everything done before Kavala returned. She was lucky that the bathroom was connected to the office. Chloe's attention was drawn to an unusual light. The window was sealed with magic. Chloe thought that there would be no difficulty in escaping. She did not foresee that there could be such protection here. Still, this won't be her problem. She'll just take a different route. Relying entirely on magical protection, they probably didn't even expect an intruder to break in. But no one can stop Chloe. All she had to do was get out of here through a secret passage that Kavala didn't know about. Chloe managed to find him. The girl entered the secret passage. Apart from her, only the Emperor and the late Empress knew about him. According to legend, only emperors and their wives had access to the secret corridors of the palace. Every room in the palace has a secret path leading out, as Chloe has known about each of them since childhood, always managing to slip past the servants unnoticed and even devising a plan to steal the key from Kavala's chambers. Chloe was glad that fragments of her childhood memories had surfaced at the right moment. Since this path was intended for the imperial couple, Kavala most likely had no idea that such a path led to her own bedroom. Being a princess, Chloe shouldn't have known about his existence either, but she knew about him. Mother broke tradition and told Chloe about the secret passages. Perhaps she foresaw that danger would one day overtake her daughter, so she revealed the secret to protect her. At the time, Chloe didn't understand why she needed this information, or why Mother forbade sharing it with anyone. Chloe stepped confidently down the descent into the darkness. She thought about her mother. She swore to her that she would definitely survive. She had no shortage of confidence. Finally, Chloe was there. Mother told her to place the key above the door. Chloe followed the directions she had learned as a child to the letter. She succeeded, and the door swung open in front of the girl. So this is what the Empress's treasury was like. Jewelry worn by the first ruler of the ancient kingdom. The rings that Chloe's mother loved so much. Each of them was priceless, and it was unclear how to take it all away from here. Chloe grabbed everything indiscriminately, and her bag was filled to the brim, so it was unlikely that she would be able to take anything else. Chloe wondered if there was something around here that could hold the jewelry, and soon found something suitable. It seemed odd that such a tattered bag would be in a place like this, but Chloe decided she was lucky and would just use it to carry the rest of the jewelry. First, she decided to look inside. What was there looked like the Holy Grail? It had a hole all the way to the bottom. Chloe assumed it was decorative. It looked incredibly old, covered in scratches. Chloe wasn't sure about its value. It was heavy and didn't look particularly expensive, so she decided to leave it there. Her bags were already overflowing. Chloe took everything she could carry. Now she needed to get out. Even though she managed to slip through the secret passage, she could get into trouble if Kavala discovered her tracks. So the ideal solution was to burn the place to hell. This will make it impossible to determine what valuables were missing or to identify the robber. Once the flames die down, Chloe will scatter some decorations around. Kavala's greedy subordinates won't be able to resist pocketing them, and the more diamonds there are, the harder it will be to find the real culprit. However, one thought stopped Chloe. This ancient grail. For some reason, she couldn't get it out of her head. She didn't know if he had any value to Kavala. Okay, let him suffer, Chloe decided. At this point, a fire was already noticed in the palace, and it was determined that the Empress's treasury was on fire. Nobody understood how it caught fire. The maids whispered that a thief had broken into the Empress's chambers the previous night, and perhaps this too was his doing, but it was unclear how he had managed to escape. The treasury burned to the ground. The loss was irreparable. The maids saw someone suspicious that night. This man wandered among the fire. He picked up the jewel from the floor and put it in his own pocket, greed clouding his mind. But he wasn't the only one who pocketed the jewels last night. What else could you expect from people? Chloe was satisfied. Everything was going according to her plan. Returning to her room, Chloe hid all the jewelry as quickly as possible. She placed them inside a teddy bear that her mother had once given her. The maids never touched it, and Chloe hid the rest in a compartment at the bottom of the box where the toy was kept. As soon as Chloe arrives in Ronheim, she will immediately exchange them for money, and after a while, even Kavala will not be able to track them. No one will know that the real thief was the princess. The only ones who saw her face altered by magic were the guards. But that red-haired girl knew who Chloe really was. If she is caught and her deception is exposed, it is unknown what will happen to her plan for revenge. Chloe forced herself to calm down, told herself that everything would be okay, and remembered her past life. Kavala spread wanted posters for the girl throughout the empire. She even organized search parties, but found no one. This means that this time everything will be the same. Chloe will be heading to Ronheim soon. Chloe had no reason to worry, because they would never see the thief again. At this time, the red-haired girl thought that she could never have imagined that she would be declared a thief and arsonist of the Empress's palace. She believed that the girl, the real culprit, should take responsibility for what she had done. The red-haired girl was sure that she would make the stranger pay for everything when they met again. Kavala was furious. She didn't understand why it was impossible to catch this thief. She wanted to know how the thief could have learned about the magic key and used it, since she and her interlocutor were the only ones who knew about its existence. She asked if this was his doing, if he had conspired with that devil to steal the imperial jewels. She screamed at the man who was kneeling in front of her. He said that his sister knows him better than anyone else. He would never betray her. He promised her that he would return every single piece of jewelry. He tried to persuade her to calm down and pull herself together. "Okay," Kavala said finally. She was ready to trust him one last time. She heard that the fire had already been cleared and wanted to know if her grail had been found. It wasn't found, but the girl couldn't have stolen it, so there was no need to worry. Kavala asked why he was so sure of this. He explained that she simply had no need for this thing. At first glance, the grail looks like a simple decorative item, and besides, it is hidden in an old, tattered bag. The thief would not even look at it. Kavala told him to hold his tongue until she placed the relic right in front of her. He himself knew how much effort she had put into finding a way to awaken him, and very soon she would get hold of the key with Chloe's help. But it will be of no use if Kavala stands here without the Holy Grail, and it must be returned by then. Kavala's brother had to do everything possible to get it back to her. The rest of the jewelry wasn't that important. Endless youth awaited her, a treasure that could not be compared with any pieces of glass, and unshakable power. Her brother reminded Kavala that if she used the relic, everyone would know she had it, and the Ronheimians would not sit idly by. But she didn't care. Kavala said that by the time she mastered this power, Ronheim would be wiped off the face of the earth. His men will be condemned for abandoning the princess to her fate. Kavala's brother asked if she was going to use the princess as bait. Kavala replied that of course she had given her what she dreamed of. Now Chloe had to pay for it. "Everything will be as you wish, sister," said Kavala's brother, and she replied that it certainly was. She demanded that the girl who had started this whole mess be brought to her only by tearing it apart with her own hands. Could Kavala satisfy her rage? Kavala also asked if the person who was supposed to accompany Chloe was ready, and Kavala's brother replied that she would enter the palace on the day of Chloe's departure. Kavala said that she trusted him in this matter. He had to make sure that she was treated properly. She was an important person. One disaster followed another. The palace was in chaos, the wedding ceremony was cancelled, and the day of departure to Ronheim was rapidly approaching. Chloe had been ready to leave for a long time, but something was still bothering her. Very soon she will get into the carriage. But Call had never visited her since then, and she wanted to say goodbye to him properly. It was the first time they had been separated for such a long time. Had something really happened to her friend? Perhaps it was because the maids never left the princess's side for a second. They were busy with the bustle of wedding preparations, and Call was always so careful that he didn't find a moment to show up. Chloe went to the maids and told them to put it all away. She said that she didn't need it anyway. The maid explained with surprise that it was a gift from the Empress. Was the princess really going to neglect her generosity? Chloe didn't see any point in wearing a summer dress in Ronheim, where the blizzard howled year-round. It was nothing more than just proof that Kavala wanted to show her supposed concern for her. That's why Chloe didn't plan to take it with her to Ronheim. She can wear this dress when she returns to the Imperial Palace, and before the trip, she wants to be alone with her thoughts, so the maids need to leave her. The maids left, grumbling that she had become so nervous with age. But if she wanted to be alone, they could leave her alone. Chloe was glad that she had managed to drive them out. "Call, are you there?" Chloe called. She was alone now, he could come. This was their only chance to say goodbye. He had told her not to worry. No matter where she went, he would always be there. Maybe he meant that he would follow her to Ronheim. But Chloe understood that this was impossible. If not now, then perhaps they would never see each other again. "Your Highness, it's time to leave." Chloe heard and thought that, after all, they had never met him. It was painful, but if she stayed here any longer, she would be under suspicion. She should at least leave a letter for him, Chloe thought, and suddenly noticed a note on the table. She didn't see her here a second ago." "Don't worry, I will follow you everywhere," it said. This short line made Chloe feel emotional. Thank heavens Call didn't abandon her. He kept his promise to stay by her side. "Your Highness." Chloe's voice was called from behind the door again. Chloe brushed away a tear and thought that if anyone found the note, she could be in danger. They were already starting to hurry her out of the door, and the girl decided that it would be better to leave a note in the room. At the threshold of the chambers, Chloe turned around and thought that the servants would never know who exactly wrote it anyway. They must have been waiting for her for a long time. Accompanied by her maids, Chloe went out to Marquis Rodrian. She asked if they needed to leave right away. The Marquis turned around slowly upon hearing her voice. "Of course, Your Highness," he said. The maids were discussing how the mad princess was finally leaving, and that perhaps the palace would be calmer now. While cleaning her chambers, they discovered a note. After reading it, one maid told another that although the princess seemed normal from time to time, such things confirmed her inferiority. "Don't worry, I will follow you everywhere." It was written on the piece of paper, but it was the princess's own handwriting, and the maids couldn't understand why she would write letters to herself. It must have been a so-called imaginary friend, because sometimes the princess talks to herself, and the note was just part of the illusion. It all looked pretty terrible. How could she go crazy to such an extent? Most likely, she inherited the illness from the late empress. Suddenly, there was a loud sound from the door swinging open. It was a knight from Ronheim, but the princess had already left, and it was unclear what brought him here. The knight was looking for the box, and when he found it, he tried to pick it up and carry it away. One of the maids was indignant that he dared to touch something that belonged to the palace. How could a stranger allow himself to do this? "How dare I?" the knight asked again, and then declared that it was funny to hear this from servants who spread rumors about their own mistress. This rebuke outraged the maids. What did this barbarian dare to say? How insolently he looked at them. The knight had heard before that the princess was Kavala's adored daughter, but the servants said such nasty things about her that it was hard to even imagine how badly she was treated. Her Highness did not look at all distraught when she asked him to bring a box from her chambers, which contained something very important to her. She also didn't act rudely compared to the rest of the people of Arenthal. She apologized for bothering him, an ordinary knight of Ronheim. "Your Highness," he called out to the princess as he approached the carriage. He said that he had brought what Her Highness had asked for, and the Marquise praised him. "Thank you, knight," the princess said with a dazzling smile. After everything he had seen, the knight felt a little sorry for her. She knew nothing of his thoughts and continued to smile, and the Marquise said that if she had taken what she needed, then it was time for them to go. He wanted to tell her something. He asked her to call him by his first name, Alex, if that was convenient for her. And then he called her his mistress. The princess was surprised at first, then she became happy and said that she would be very pleased to deal with him now. Chloe really liked the way he called her. It meant that these people accepted her. Finally, the carriage and its accompanying riders set off. "This day has come," said Kavala, who had been watching the departure from the window. So far, everything she saw was going according to her plan. Andrea didn't understand what the hell his mother was up to. He complained about this to his interlocutor, Viscount Pelsis, saying that he had already thought that he would finally be able to begin to accomplish great things, having emerged from his mother's shadow. But she sent the princess to Marquis Rodrian. Andrea said that the Viscount couldn't even imagine how much time he had spent persuading her, but the princess still refused to marry her brother's choice. The Viscount asked if she really didn't want to become his wife that much. However, she unquestioningly agreed when she was offered marriage to Marquis Rodrian, as if she did not feel any disgust for this barbarian. No one could argue that the Marquis was good, at least because royal blood flowed through his veins, but the princess could not reject the Viscount only because of his lack of nobility, since he had even prepared considerable funds to marry the mad princess, thereby tying himself to the royal family. But she ignored the Viscount's sincerity and married the Marquis Rodrian. The Viscount said that the princess was still in the capital. Perhaps they could still do something since he had already given money in exchange for this marriage. Andrea asked if Viscount Pelsis was going to threaten the Prince of the Empire over some papers. The Viscount hastened to assure that this was not what he had meant at all, to which Andrea replied that sending Chloe to Ronheim was his mother's decision, and he asked what he should do in such a situation. Andrea said that as long as the Marquis was alive, nothing would change, and that was what upset him most. But if someone killed him, he would help cover up such a crime and would even generously reward that person. These words seemed to make Viscount Pelsis think. The Viscount asked what would happen if the man asked for the princess as a reward, and Andrea replied that of course he would. If anyone would agree to accept a princess tainted by a marriage alliance with a barbarian, Andrea would be honestly grateful. The Viscount thought that if such an act would help him join the royal family, then so be it. After the wedding, he will simply lock the girl away somewhere so that she doesn't cause problems. No one will miss the mad princess anyway. In this case, the Viscount was ready to fulfill all the prince's wishes. Meanwhile, the carriage in which Chloe was riding continued its journey. The girl, as if enchanted, looked out the window at the landscapes flashing behind the glass. "Have you lost something?" the Marquise finally asked her. She explained that it was simply the first time she had been outside the palace, and everything seemed so unusual and unfamiliar to her. Callias was very surprised that this happened. For the first time, it turned out that the princess had never left the palace and had never traveled anywhere. Chloe replied that no, and thought that she had lived like a bird in a cage. There was some awkward atmosphere between them. The Marquis suddenly took out some kind of scroll and said that he asked for forgiveness in any case. All this was in the past. He asked Chloe to look. It was a map. The girl did not understand what her companion had suddenly planned. Callias pointed out on the map where they were currently located. If they continue along this same road, they will come across vast farmlands. Having overcome them, they will reach the river and then ride along it. Further on, they will find a small fortress with a magic circle. Chloe exclaimed with delight that then they would be able to use teleportation magic. Callias looked at the girl with some bewilderment. Callias explained that they would need to use a teleportation point to travel faster to Avene, as the journey from the capital to Avene would take 2 months, even if they traveled without stopping. Chloe looked at the map thoughtfully. The world was so huge. The imperial palace and the capital, where she spent her entire life, looked like just tiny dots on the map. She tried to figure out where Ronheim was. It was so far away that it was not on the map. It would be a long journey. The Marquis probably had to prepare for it very thoroughly. When Chloe asked about it, Callias replied that she was right. The journey would not be easy, and he would have to be patient for a little while. Callias said that if Chloe entered Ronheim, she might lose her chance to return home, and the whole trip could cost her her life. The girl replied that everything was fine and she was ready for anything. She recalled that it was she who proposed the marriage contract to the Marquis. Callias looked at this girl very carefully. Chloe noticed that she was not as weak as he somehow thought. This was exactly what she wanted, to go somewhere where no one could find her. They arrived at the fortress. The small town of Vermin is located nearby. "So this is what you are like, Vermin," Chloe exclaimed. She had imagined it completely differently. She thought that there would only be knights here. But here, a brisk trade was in full swing. They were selling dry rations at an attractive price, leather boots, wooden ones, with patterns for every taste and color, leather armor and capacious wineskins. The city was much more vibrant than Chloe could have imagined. Chloe thought maybe she was just overreacting, but it seemed to her that one of the men on the street was deliberately trying not to look in their direction. Chloe asked Callias why none of the traders were coming to them. Callias replied that it was most likely because they thought the convoy had come from the north, and the people didn't want to waste their time on northerners. "That's how it is," Chloe muttered. She wanted to clarify why, but she was afraid that he would think she was a bore, like everyone else around her. Callias was in no hurry to answer her questions or explain anything. But finally, Callias said that wineskins were simply useless in the north. He explained that ice forms quickly there and it always snows, so northern residents do not need special vessels to collect water from reservoirs. The same applies to boots made of ordinary leather and fabric. Chloe was glad that, noticing her interest, Callias decided to explain everything. The questions didn't even irritate him. Callias said that if she were to walk in the snow all day, regular shoes would quickly become wet in the north. Chloe would also need waterproof, insulated boots. Chloe was surprised to note that the Marquis answered her with complete sincerity. It was so strange that someone other than Calla would speak to her so openly. She had never felt so happy. Callias said he could tell Chloe more on the way. But now they had to visit some place. Together they went to some shop. "Long time no see, sir," said the girl who came out to meet them. Callias said that Rhonda looked great, and then asked where Paletto was. The girl replied that her husband had gone hunting with friends in a vein while they were talking. Chloe looked around, noticing that every piece of clothing in this shop was made of thick fabric and fur. She assumed that this is how people from the north dressed. It was incredible how different their outfits were from the usual Oriental ones, and meanwhile, Rhonda said that she had been warned that the Marquis would be buying women's clothes. Callias replied with a smile that he wanted to buy warm clothes for his wife. Chloe blushed because she felt awkward hearing the Marquis call her his wife, although it wasn't exactly wrong. Callias told her that the weather in the north was much harsher, and in the clothes that Her Highness was wearing now, she would not be able to last there for even a minute. Callias knew the princess might not like it, but he still advised her to change into something more appropriate. In Orental, there are never any severe frosts, so even in winter they dressed according to fashion. The higher the status, the more extravagant lace and accessories one can see on a person. Such is the culture of aristocrats. This is why they look down on the northern peoples, considering them barbarians because of their rough clothing, made from the skins of wild animals, and the lack of decoration on it. It will not be easy for a princess who grew up in such traditions to decide to change her style of clothing. Chloe thought it was her warmest outfit, but it wouldn't protect her from the harsh climate, and she was afraid the Marquis would waste his money. Callias saw Chloe's expression change. He assumed she was offended by his offer, but Chloe suddenly smiled and thanked Marquis Rodrian for his courtesy. The princess asked where she could change her clothes. Rhonda invited the princess to come with her, so that they could help Her Highness choose clothes. Everyone was surprised that the princess even thanked them, because they thought she would put on a concert, but now one could assume that it would not be as difficult with her as everyone claimed. Chloe admitted to Rhonda that she had no idea what they wore in the north and asked her to recommend something suitable. Rhonda assured her that everything would be as Her Highness wished, and she would give the clothes to the maid who would assist the princess. Callias, damn it, Brantian thought, looking at his friend. He would like to understand why his eyes glow so much when he sees the princess. From the very beginning, this marriage was a performance, staged to determine the location of the holy relic. The plans of both parties became confused and led them here. But now that it has been confirmed that it is with Kavala, there is no need to maintain this marriage. Looking at how the princess obediently went with the Marquis to the deserted lands of Ronheim, there is no doubt that she is a spy sent by Kavala. Although the princess herself may not have bad intentions, the servants accompanying her may pass on information about Ronheim and the fact that Callias does not have the key that the Empress needs. So they should send the princess back as soon as possible, but they simply cannot do this without a reason. They must force her to return of her own free will. Brantian noted that they hadn't even reached the north yet. Perhaps the princess was now obeying Callias's words, but no one knew when her mood would change. Callias replied that he didn't think Chloe would change immediately upon arriving in the northern lands, and yet he looked at the girl with such a warm gaze. Only Callias made it clear that the conversation on this topic was over, and then asked if Brantian had managed to obtain more information about the relic. Brantian replied that no one claimed to have seen the relic in the burnt treasury. If it had really disappeared, there would be no reason to send the princess to Ronheim, so now they had to make sure it was safe. Callias replied that it was good that the relic was in a safe place, but it was completely unclear when the chance to retrieve it would arise. There was a knock on the door of the room where Chloe had retired to try on new clothes. A voice from behind the door announced that it was a maid who had come to help Her Highness change her clothes. Chloe turned around and saw dark hair and a freckled girl's face through the half-open door. This girl seemed very familiar to Chloe. The hair color had changed, but Chloe remembered this appearance clearly. They met the day Chloe stole Kavala's jewelry. "You're that thief!" Chloe exclaimed. Chloe asked why the stranger was dressed as a maid, and she assumed that she had used her powers to join the procession heading to Ronheim. The girl smiled and said that she did not understand what His Highness was talking to her about because she had not stolen a penny. Moreover, Her Highness's skill in theft was enviable. The stranger said that she saw everything. The princess was rummaging through the treasury and then started that very fire. But for some reason, it was the stranger who was wanted, and a warrant was even issued for her arrest, so she couldn't leave the imperial palace, the girl said, and Chloe thought that this girl even saw her set fire to the treasury, and now these rumors could reach Kavala. The stranger said that nevertheless, thanks to the princess, she managed to get out. So she does not hold a grudge against her, she barely managed to merge with the procession leaving the palace. She was looking for Chloe for one reason and one reason only. She was here to make a deal. The soldiers who were searching for the stranger had already set up camp outside. If the princess allowed them to accompany her, the stranger would be able to successfully escape, and then she would take the secret of that day with her to the grave. The stranger wanted to know what the princess thought about becoming accomplices. Chloe thought that the soldiers the stranger mentioned must be Kavala's men. If she refused the deal now, the stranger would hold a grudge and tell them everything that happened that night. Then Chloe would be in a difficult situation. No matter how she felt about it, the deal was very profitable for Chloe, so she told the stranger that they had come to an agreement because she herself needed a servant who had no connection with Kavala. "Wonderful, Princess Chloe," the stranger said with a smile. She said her name was Ramya Blake and expressed hope that they would work together. After this, Ramya reminded that Her Highness wanted to change her clothes. Judging by the guards accompanying the princess, they were natives of the north. Ramya managed to find out about their tastes in clothes, and she brought the princess something. Ramya suggested that Chloe take a closer look at the skin, which she would never find in Orenthal. She offered outfit after outfit, claiming that they were supposedly tailored for Chloe. Ramya found outfits that could suit a princess, declaring that with such a face any clothes would look great. Chloe wondered if she could trust this girl. Brantian reminded Callias that they would need to go to the teleportation point soon, but the Marquis said that they would wait a little longer. Chloe came up and thanked him for waiting. She understood that she had to wait for quite a long time. She asked if the outfit she was wearing suited her. It was the first time she was trying on clothes from the northern peoples, so she wasn't sure if everything fit her well. Callias looked at her without taking his eyes off her, but for some reason did not say a word. Chloe didn't understand the Marquise's silence. Was it really that bad? Ramya smirked behind her, and Brantian realized that Callias was head over heels in love with this girl. Finally, Callias said that it suited Chloe very well. Chloe realized that this was the first time she saw embarrassment on the Marquise's face. Ramya whispered in her ear that she had said so, that the Marquis would like it. Brantian thought that if things continued like this, they wouldn't be able to send the princess back. He apologized for his tactlessness and introduced himself to Her Highness, stating that he was Viscount Brantian Creef, assistant to the Marquis. Chloe said with a smile that it was nice to meet her and hoped they would get along. Brantian reported that all preparations were complete. It was time to go to the teleportation point. The crew entered a circle glowing with magical symbols, and Chloe couldn't help but let out a surprised cry. It was so amazing that she simply couldn't believe her own eyes in her past life. She was always locked in the palace, so she simply didn't have the opportunity to see something like this. "Wait a moment, Your Highness," Chloe suddenly heard. Callias pulled her towards him, saying that too much light could make her dizzy. It was too close. Chloe muttered with embarrassment that this was all her first time, so she didn't know anything. Callias sighed, and Chloe actually saw that flash of light. She opened her eyes with difficulty after losing consciousness. Someone asked her if she was awake. She liked the low, but at the same time gentle voice, its timbre, but she could not remember who it belonged to. Finally she remembered. It was Marquis Rodrian. Chloe realized she was lying on his lap, but all she remembered was looking at the light from the teleportation circle a second ago. The Marquis explained that she had briefly lost consciousness during the transfer, something that happened quite often, so she had nothing to worry about. But Chloe was incredibly uncomfortable about the whole thing. She tried to calm her heart, because Callias could hear how fast and strong it was beating. Callias asked her if she would like to look at the landscape outside the window while she was sleeping. They managed to leave the fortress city. Now they were already in the northern lands. Chloe had never seen so much snow before. Everything around was absolutely white. At the moment, they were passing through Aven, a region with the least amount of precipitation, so the teleportation point was located here because the situation in other settlements was much worse. Chloe asked in amazement, was that really possible since literally everything here was covered in snow? Callias explained that this was precisely why Ronheim had always had an advantage during times of external invasion. He asked if Chloe wanted to go out and admire the beauty of the snowy plains, and the girl hopefully asked if it was possible. "Of course," the Marquis replied and helped her out of the carriage. "He just asked me to be careful because the snow here is so deep that you can easily fall through." It was hard to believe that Chloe would be living here from now on. In this land where the wind seems to pierce the skin and the frosty air makes breathing difficult, it was a terrible place where you could freeze to death. However, Chloe was confident in her decision. She will have no choice but to fall in love with the kingdom of ice and cold. Callias watched the princess's reaction to this land. He came closer to throw the fur-lined cloak over her shoulders. Callias said that the north wind was very harsh. Chloe turned to face him, tears in her eyes. Callias said that Her Highness was strong, and he expressed confidence that she would soon get used to the climate of this place. Chloe thought she knew she had chosen him for a reason. One day, a dear friend of hers gave her a good idea, Chloe said. "He told me to pick my 5 happiest memories and play them in my head when real life gets tough. Then there will be a desire to live on," but Chloe didn't have so many positive memories in the past. When things got tough, the first person she thought of was Call, because other than their meeting, there were no moments she wanted to remember. "Thank you, Marquis," Chloe said, smiling as she had more good memories today. Chloe, thought Callias, looking at her. He thought she had completely forgotten him, but she remembered everything, and he was glad to hear it. "When the sun goes below the horizon, the blizzard will intensify," explained Callias, and suggested returning to the cart. They soon arrived at an inn in Avens, and the maid accompanying the princess was outraged that Her Highness would have to spend the night in such a dilapidated place. The maid demanded that the lord of this territory be notified of the princess's arrival, so that he could provide her with quarters in his castle. They had been arguing about this for half an hour. Chloe thought that this was the longest trip of her entire life. She just wanted to rest. She did not understand at what point the situation went wrong. A couple of hours earlier, Callias had explained to her that in the north, snowstorms intensified sharply as night fell. The journey could be difficult for pioneers. The road to Ronheim would be long, and if they set out now, they would have to set up camp in the mountains anyway. Therefore, it was worth stopping in Avon and continuing our journey in the morning with renewed strength. But since their schedule was tight, they would have to spend the night not in the Lord's castle, but at an inn, and Chloe was not against such a development of events. If she officially informs the Lord of her arrival, he will be obliged to receive her as a royal person. In exchange for this, as a sign of gratitude, Chloe will have to stay in the Lord's castle for several days to take part in social events. Even the emperor himself often chooses to abstain from social receptions during provincial inspections. For a princess who was simply moving into her husband's domain, it would be unwise to disturb the lord. Chloe did not want to attract unnecessary attention, but as soon as the Marquise left, everything went wrong. Brantian assured that this decision was made jointly by the Marquis and Her Highness, but for some reason the maid insisted on disregarding the wishes of her own mistress. The maid said that Her Highness had always lived in the palace and did not even know what an inn was, and it was the duty of her attendants not to allow her to suffer because of her ignorance. Brantian replied that he did not understand what the suffering was about, because this was the only inn in Avon where even royalty stayed, and Avon was on the border before Ronheim joined the empire. Then their relationship deteriorated. Even when nobles come, the reception from the lord may not be as warm as everyone expects. Chloe thought that, except for Ramia, all the maids here were personally selected by Kavala. Among them, there were undoubtedly those to whom she gave special assignments. This quarrelsome one was most likely tasked with keeping an eye on Chloe, so she would refrain from objecting, but squabbling with the Ronheimians would also bring nothing good, so there was no choice. She got out of the carriage and told the two to stop immediately. Chloe told the maid to step aside with her. She noticed that this girl treated the mistress's requests with obvious disdain. Nothing else could be expected from Kavala's assistance. The maid assured that she was ordered to serve Her Highness faithfully and truly to help in the fulfillment of the mission, so she asked to be allowed to take control of the situation. It seemed that this servant had received some instructions from Kavala, but she was certainly not the only one in the imposed retinue. Kavala simply could not have chosen only this girl with a reckless character and an inability to hide her true intentions. Chloe asked the girl to introduce herself and noted that since she knew about the special mission, it meant the Empress trusted her. The maid's name was Vanessa, and Chloe reminded her that she had to win the Marquise's trust and reveal his secrets. If Vanessa stubbornly refused to cooperate, the people of Ronheim would treat them with hostility. Chloe asked why Vanessa was deliberately provoking the Marquise's assistants and making her princess's task more difficult. Chloe asked if Vanessa was taking the imperial orders so lightly. She had to be sure that this girl would not disrupt her plans. Vanessa had absolutely no idea what was happening. They told her that the princess was nothing more than a simple fool who could barely speak a word, a mentally ill person. It was obvious to Chloe what this girl thought of her. She told her that if the Marquise got angry because of this and the mission failed, she would have no choice but to report the incident to the Empress. Vanessa bowed and said that she would be more careful in the future. Chloe noted with surprise that the girl accepted defeat too easily. It was so simple-minded. Chloe expressed her wish that something like this would not happen again. Then she told Viscount Creef that there was no point in bothering the Lord. She could easily have spent the night at the inn. Brantian hesitated for a moment, not quite prepared for such a rapid change. He said that he then asked Her Highness to go inside. One of the knights realized that the damned Idelians were clearly planning to use this marriage. Their real goal was to find out the master's secrets, so whispering in the cart, hoping that no one would hear, was very stupid. I should have reported this to Mr. Brentian immediately, but he said that he knew about it from the start. The knight was surprised that they brought the princess with them, fully aware of the threat. Brantian explained that this was an order from the Marquis, who probably had his own reasons for it, which suddenly caused indignation in the knight. He wanted to know why they had to call Prince Ronheim a Marquis, just to appease those oriental dogs. After all, he should have rightfully been called king. "Enough, Andrew," said Havoc Blago, commander of the Knights of Ronheim. He said that Andrew himself understood perfectly well that if the Imperials found out that the master was called a prince in Ronheim, or even worse, someone called him a king, it could be regarded as an attempt at rebellion. The knight darkened, asked for forgiveness. Brantian told him to go. Brantian and Havoc looked after him gloomily. Brantian asked if his interlocutor thought the knights were not disciplined enough, and Havoc agreed that it was high time to rein them in. Although, considering that most of the people in Ronheim Castle were blood relatives, it might not be easy. Nevertheless, the princess could not be allowed to become attached to the Marquise. It was true that the princess needed to be guarded. Havoc had to keep an eye on her during Brantian's absence. As soon as they arrived here, the first thing the Marquis did was to feed the cats. Now they had to find him. Vanessa ordered the maids to help the princess change her clothes. "Forgive the intrusion, Your Highness." Chloe heard the words addressed to her through her fatigue. The maids weren't particularly tidy, and Chloe thought she hadn't realized it because she had been traveling separately from the imposed entourage all this time. But now it was obvious that these girls were not only unfamiliar with each other, but also completely alien to palace etiquette. Now it was clear how Ramya had managed to blend in with them so easily. However, all these maids were selected by Kavala. She was trying to do something in this way. Ramya noticed that the princess was cold and suggested lighting the fireplace. Vanessa shouted at her that she had already said that everyone should act only according to her orders. She informed the other maids that everything was done in a strict order and everyone had to understand that. Chloe thought that Vanessa had authority over them. Vanessa asked her if she should order Ronheim's servants to prepare food for the princess. Chloe replied that she was not hungry. She thought that she could command the maids herself. She said that everyone had worked well today and could go and rest, without listening to Vanessa's objections. Chloe explained that the weather would be rough tomorrow morning, so they needed to get plenty of sleep today. This made the girls very happy, as they were all tired from the trip. Without listening to Vanessa's objections, all the maids hurried to their assigned room. Vanessa bowed and said that the maids were exhausted after a long journey and went to rest before their mistress, which was completely unacceptable, but Chloe objected that everything was fine since she herself had given them permission to do so. She said that Vanessa had probably left too and could go. Chloe was left alone in the room. She thought that her fears were confirmed. With the exception of Vanessa, all the others were not maids specially trained in imperial court etiquette. It was unclear why Kavala had sent these clumsy girls with her. Perhaps she wanted to divert suspicion from herself. Also, maybe Kavala thought that Vanessa alone would be enough to keep an eye on Chloe. In any case, she needed to take a closer look at the maids. There was a knock on the door. Ramya asked permission to come in. Chloe didn't understand what happened because she told everyone to go to bed. The girl entered the room with a bucket. Chloe didn't understand why she needed it. Ramya explained that she had decided to bring warm water so that the princess would not freeze to death. When she told the innkeeper that the princess might die, he panicked and hastily handed her a bucket. Ramya still found it funny to think about the expression on his face. Ramya advised Chloe to soak her feet in warm water. It will make her feel much better. Chloe said that Ramya first puts her in danger and then takes care of her. The girl replied with a laugh that now they are partners and colleagues. If the princess died earlier and Ramya didn't have time to escape, this could become a serious problem for her. Chloe noted that Ramya should also learn to watch her language. The new assistant was not lacking in rudeness, but for some reason this didn't even irritate Chloe. She asked when Ramya was planning to escape, because she probably wanted to go home as soon as possible. Her family must be worried about her. Ramya stated that her family is the people she meets along the way, and she calls home a place where she can lie down and rest. Chloe guessed that her new acquaintance was a tramp. Ramya replied that she was suggesting that she be considered a romantic wanderer. Chloe thought about their first meeting. Then the guards mistook the princess for Ramya and treated her like a vagabond. Perhaps Ramya really did sneak into the palace that night to steal something. Chloe asked the girl if she really was a wanderer, then why did she enter the Empress's palace? To which Ramya replied in confusion that she had been kidnapped. Chloe asked incredulously why, but Ramya replied that she had no way of knowing. She was just drinking in a tavern, fell asleep, and when she woke up, her hands and feet were in shackles and she was in a cage. Ramya had no idea why. She assumed they might be planning to sacrifice her. There was a knock at the door again, announcing that they had brought food for Her Highness. Ramya happily declared that she would finally be able to eat her fill. Chloe thought about it. She didn't understand why someone would kidnap a person and lock him in a cage. And all this happened in the palace of Kavala. Chloe remembered the man's face. She was sure she had seen him somewhere before. Suddenly a memory overtook her. He was the same errand boy who did all the dirty work for Viscount Pelsis. But what the hell could he be doing here? Perhaps Kavala was involved in this. Or Andrea could have been involved. Either way, it was necessary to figure out what they were up to. Ramya noticed that the princesses had clearly put in some effort with the dinner. The food was still warm. "Don't eat that!" Chloe cried, knocking the tray out of the girl's hands. Ramya was outraged, but Chloe didn't know what they could have put in the food. Viscount Pelsis's goal was also unclear, but it was quite obvious that he was planning something dangerous. "Ramya, we must warn the Marquise at all costs," Chloe exclaimed, rushing to her new friend. The magic that Ramya used to change Chloe's face, the princess asked to use it again if possible. She needed it for a very short time. She asked to use her and stay here in the guise of Chloe while she made her way to other places. Chloe, wrapped in a cloak, overheard some people rejoicing at the fact that they were located on another floor, away from these savages. These were the imperial knights that Kavala had assigned to the princess under the pretext of protecting her. Probably, just like the maids, they were supposed to keep an eye on her. Therefore, in order to avoid unnecessary suspicion, it was impossible to let them know that she was looking for the Marquis. So she asked Ramya to take her form and stay in the room. But she herself did not disguise herself as her, fearing that someone would sense something was wrong. In any case, they will treat her with distrust, but they will have no reason to refuse a wife looking for a husband. Even though it was a deal, Chloe wasn't very happy with their marriage being used in this way. She met Alex first and recognized him. It was the knight who, at her request, brought a box with a teddy bear and then asked her to call him by name. Chloe hoped that he would at least listen to her. Alex asked why my lady was dressed like that. Chloe only asked if Alex knew where the Marquis was. He didn't understand why she was even looking for him at such a time. Chloe explained that she had seen a suspicious man at the hotel. The Marquis might be in danger, and she had to warn him. Alex said that he had been standing here all this time, but had not seen anyone suspicious. No one except the maids had gone up to Her Highness's floor. Chloe objected that this could not be. There had to be more than one staircase leading up. They assumed that perhaps the stranger had entered through the window or had already hidden in another room, but there were imperial knights upstairs who would certainly have noticed if anyone suspicious had appeared. Chloe was forced to admit to this night that she simply did not trust any of the people sent by the imperial palace. She knew it might be very hard to believe, especially when she had no proof, but if she knew of impending danger, then not taking action would mean repeating the terrible mistakes of her past life. Chloe said she realized her words weren't very convincing, but she was genuinely concerned about the Marquise's safety. So she wanted to warn him before it was too late. She asked Alex to tell her where her husband might be. Alex agreed with her admonitions, but since the gentleman had not yet returned, it was possible to talk to the commander. The knight commander approached and introduced himself as Havik Blago. He wanted to know who the princess had seen suspiciously. Chloe explained that she thought they had been following the procession from the capital itself, so the Marquis might be in danger, so she asked where he was now. Havik said that Her Highness had no need to worry about the Marquis. He would return soon. The gentleman just went to check on his cats. This explanation surprised Chloe greatly, but it did not seem at all out of the ordinary to the Knights of Ronheim, who were discussing that these cats must have been very hungry while their master was away, and since his trip this time was prolonged, he probably hurried to feed them, since all this time they were faithfully waiting for him at the circle of magical movement. Chloe wondered what other cats could be in that snowy field. At this time, Callias, who was walking through the snowstorm, noticed his pursuers. There were 3 or 4 of them, given the circumstances. They must have been people who were unhappy with his marriage to Chloe. But it seems they were ordered to kidnap him hastily without conducting proper reconnaissance. Otherwise, they would have thought this attack through more carefully. They wouldn't dare attack in a place where the voices of snowcats could be heard. Callias didn't even have to do anything as he watched the cats deal with the attackers. He said that at least one must be left alive to carry the message. Callias threw the cats a special treat they had been waiting for. He must have starved them for too long. He couldn't even imagine that they would tear apart such tasteless human flesh. He told them, when they were done, to go after the man who had escaped. "Marquis, where are you, Marquis?" suddenly reached Callias. It was Brentian, and Callias called him. Brentian saw the torn bodies in the clearing and asked if this was the work of the snow spirits. Callias explained that the killers suddenly appeared while the cats were feeding. With their white fur, they were almost invisible on such a snowy night, so the thugs were caught off guard. Now he wondered what idiot sent them. But they will soon find out. The cats are now chasing the one who escaped, so soon it will be possible to find out the whole story of what is happening. Callias was sure that he wasn't the only one they were targeting. He asked if Her Highness's security was reliable. Brentian replied that he had ordered her to be guarded with an ironclad defense, but it seemed that Havik was facing problems because of the Imperial Knights. They were blocking his access to the floor occupied by the princess, which meant there was a breach in security. They had to hurry. If whoever was behind these killers didn't want Chloe taken alive, she was in serious danger. Callias hoped they wouldn't be late. They arrived just in the midst of a dispute between the Imperial warriors and the Knights of Ronheim. The Imperial warriors were asking why they dared not trust them. It was not the first time they had said that only Her Highness's maids had climbed the stairs. They checked all the rooms and have already repeated many times that there is no one here who could arouse suspicion. Brentian asked what the noise was, but Callias had an idea. Havik noticed the Marquis and apologized to him for causing a commotion. Her Highness said that she saw a suspicious person, so they tried to investigate, but the Imperial Guard did not want to cooperate. Callias said that was enough explanation. He wanted to know where the princess was. Havik replied that they had moved Her Highness to a safer room. She said that if she didn't come out herself, her retinue wouldn't believe her, so she decided to wait inside. The innkeeper says he just discovered one of the inn's uniforms is missing, and perhaps the one Her Highness spotted was the thief. Callias said that if one of the hotel staff uniforms was missing, the entire building and surrounding area needed to be combed and the culprit found. The Knights of Ronheim noticed their master and were surprised that he returned earlier than everyone expected. Callias noticed Chloe standing to the side. The girl rushed to him and asked if he was okay. He realized that she was worried about him. Chloe replied that of course she was worried, because she heard that he went out alone this evening. She asked if anything had happened, if anyone had followed him, but Callias replied that nothing had happened to be worried about. He asked if Chloe herself was okay, because he heard that she had seen a suspicious person. Chloe replied that she was fine, but she was a little surprised to see a man who served Viscount Pelsis here. She assumed that his appearance here meant that the Viscount was definitely up to something. But as she spoke, Callias noticed that the girl was trembling all over. Apparently Chloe was afraid of the Viscount, but Callias did not understand why she was so afraid of her ex-fiancé, whom she did not even know closely, whether this man had done something to her. He asked what Viscount Pelsis had done to frighten her so much. "Oh," the girl suddenly exclaimed, and Callias hastened to apologize, because, succumbing to his emotions, he grabbed her by the shoulders. Chloe muttered that it was nothing. She hadn't even noticed how she was shaking. She explained that she was simply startled, worried that something might interfere with their marriage. Callias asked her not to worry because he would take care of everything. "Thank you," Chloe said. Just a moment ago she had been so nervous, but after hearing the Marquis's words, she immediately calmed down. Suddenly she heard a familiar voice. It was clearly Ramia. Chloe threw up her hands in excitement and hurried towards the disputants. The Imperial soldiers saw that Her Highness was somehow outside, although everyone said that she was in her room. Chloe rushed to Ramia. The girl's dress was covered in blood. She needed to know how badly she was injured. Ramia assured her that everything was fine. The blood was not hers. She said that she was lying in bed, as Chloe told her, when she felt someone suspicious approaching, so she just grabbed this knife and made a new hole in it. Ramia assumed he was in shock, so he immediately jumped out of the window. Chloe was very glad that Ramia was not so easy to defeat, but it was very dangerous. Ramia was surprised that the princess was worried about her. Chloe reminded that all this happened only because she herself asked Ramia for help. Ramia was surprised that the princess was so caring. Haviki approached Callias, who was watching the girls, and reported that they had captured the fugitive invader. That night, the light burned for a long time in the windows of the snow-covered house. Callias asked if the prisoner still refused to reveal the name of the person who ordered the hit. It was some amazing devotion for a mercenary. But an unfortunate incident happened tonight. Assassins came for Marquis Rodrian. But this happened in the midst of a raging snowstorm, and during the feeding of the snowcats. Callias said the snowcats also brought back the trophy they'd taken when they'd caught up with the last killer and torn apart the one who'd sent him. Callias asked the prisoner if he recognized the thing. It was a ring bearing the Viscount's seal, and the prisoner rushed forward with a cry, asking what the northern barbarian had done to him. The prisoner's reaction was very revealing. There was no need to ask more questions. Callias already understood that all this was the work of Viscount Pelsis, who probably still hadn't given up on the idea of marrying Chloe. "Marquis!" Callias suddenly heard the voice of the princess, who somehow ended up here. Chloe explained that she wanted to know if the intruder had admitted that Viscount Pelsis was behind it, and Callias said that he had confessed as soon as he was shown the Viscount's ring. Chloe asked with surprise how the ring with the Viscount's seal ended up in the Marquis's possession, and whether he had really met him. Callias replied that he had not met him personally, but that his subordinates had met with him in his stead, although the cats, he thought, were more like friends than subordinates. Callias told Chloe that he had confessed to his crimes and said that he would accept punishment, then left the ring and hurried away. Chloe said that it sounded too unlikely that the Viscount would just leave. Callias suggested that perhaps he had changed his mind. According to him, he had sworn not to approach the princess again. Chloe thought that the Viscount had sent his confidant to her bedroom at the hotel and then simply left meekly. She couldn't believe it. But the Marquis had no reason to lie. He assured Chloe that she did not need to worry. He would take care of everything. It seems like all she does is accept his help. Chloe said she felt a little empty because she didn't think the Viscount would give up on her so easily. Yet she feels relieved, as if she has been released from the chains that have bound her for so long, while at the same time she has learned that even after she has left the Imperial Palace, the traps designed to drag her to hell still lurk everywhere. It was all true. If Chloe wanted to move forward, she had to cut off all avenues of Kavala's vile deeds as soon as possible. People tried to figure out what Her Highness meant. The princess tried to question the loyalty of the Imperial Palace warriors to the Adelian family. Chloe said that they only had one mission, to protect their princess, but yet they failed even in that one task. It was doubtful that it could be called the devotion they were talking about now. The guard commander reported that his unit consisted of only the most elite Imperial warriors. And that was also true, as they said they were not some band of disparate warriors simply sent to keep an eye on Chloe. They were also troops that had been stationed in Ronheim in advance according to Kavala's plan. Since Ronheim's harsh landscape makes surprise attacks and invasions difficult, infiltrating warriors into Ronheim with the princess in advance would allow for military operations to be carried out at any time. So while Chloe had the chance, she had to ensure that the palace guards remained here. Chloe asked what they were doing when the intruder was breaking into her room. The guards only came after they heard Chloe scream. Could they now say with certainty that they really intended to protect her? Chloe turned to Havoc and noticed that he was standing guard with them, then asked what his rating was. The Knight of Ronheim replied that the princess was right. They told him not to worry, as the safety of Her Highness was the duty of the Imperial warriors. But when she was actually in danger, they abandoned their posts and did not help in the search in any way. With every word, Chloe began to think that the role of the Imperial warriors was to hinder her protection, not provide it. They were outraged by her reproaches, because how could this be? They were warriors who received orders from the Empress herself to protect the princess. "Empress, you speak," said Chloe and asked Vanessa what she should do. She had already told this girl that she could not trust these people and take them to Ronheim if they had neither the ability to protect her nor the desire to obey her orders. As Chloe had expected, she hesitated when Chloe was leading up to the point where she was going to reject the help of her so-called friends, so she said she would take that silence as consent. She stood before everyone and said that she could no longer trust those who had neglected their duty to ensure the safety of the Idelian imperial family with their protection. So she intended to approach Sir Howard. She said that from now on, she intended to entrust her protection to the Knights of Ronheim, and then asked if that would be acceptable. Ronheim's men froze, as if unable to find an answer. Then their commander bowed and said that my lady could rely on them completely. At this time, in the imperial palace of Arental, in the chambers of the Empress, Kavala noted that it couldn't be that she was already in Ronheim. She didn't understand why she needed to contact her. The message she listened to while taking a bath stated that the procession had been attacked by an unknown assailant in Avon. The princess had blamed the imperial soldiers for failing to prevent the attack and sent them back to the palace. The rest of the procession was now heading to Ronheim, and the mission would be completed immediately upon arrival. Kavala said indignantly that she had intended to use this opportunity to station troops in Ronheim. But those fools couldn't even handle one simple task, and now Kavala's plans were ruined, so she at least wanted to know what happened to the sacred relic. Her interlocutor replied that it seemed the relic had been lost outside the palace. It seemed the butler had taken it along with the other jewels. Kavala recalled that her interlocutor claimed that this was impossible, and that's how it all ended. She believed that the thief would not risk holding on to the stolen goods for long, but would try to quickly cash everything out. Kavala ordered them to search auction houses and black markets to find everyone through whose hands these treasures had passed. She told her interlocutor, whom she called Denef, not to disappoint her again, not to make her regret having given shelter to a fugitive criminal like him. He had to bring the relic to her before it fell into the wrong hands. The next morning at the inn in Avenida, Chloe asked where the Marquis was. She managed to find him quite quickly. To think that he slept next to the knights, saying that he couldn't stay at the inn, showed that he had a kind and considerate side. Perhaps it was this very kindness that made her think that the Marquis and Call were alike. The more she looked at the Marquis, the more their faces seemed similar to her. Callias asked if the princess was interested in him, if she was looking at him with that expression. Chloe, taken aback, replied that it was not for any particular reason. It was just that the Marquis looked so much like one of her friends that she couldn't stop looking at him. Callias asked if Chloe meant that precious friend she had mentioned earlier. He wanted to know what kind of person this friend was. He wanted to know more about him, and Chloe replied that she would tell him later. It was unclear why he was so curious about Calla. She couldn't just tell him the whole truth, so she tried to change the subject and asked where the carriage was, since they were planning to leave early today. Callias replied that from that point they would leave the carriage and ride on horseback, but Chloe objected that she did not know how to ride. Callias said that Her Highness could come with him. Chloe didn't immediately understand how he was going to go together, but that was how they traveled for the next few days after leaving Aven. It was hard to believe that people lived behind these rocky mountains. Chloe looked at the scenery around her, fascinated. She tried to imagine what Ronheim would be like. History books describe it as a small kingdom where it snows year-round and snowstorms howl except for a few months, making farming impossible. A poor kingdom of nomads who survived by hunting and herding. The only reason emperors for generations tried to conquer the barren lands was the legend associated with them. Legend has it that among the majestic mountains where the kingdom was built, there were huge deposits of gold and silver, and the long lifespan of the Ronheimians was due to the many medicinal herbs that granted immortality. Seeing the mysterious landscapes with their own eyes, many would think they had entered a fairy tale world. Callias noticed that Chloe was very tired and asked if perhaps some casual conversation would lift her spirits. He would like to talk to her about her precious friend. Chloe asked why he remembered it, since they had been talking about the sword more often lately. Callias replied that Chloe seemed happier when she talked about her friend. He asked if the man was a man, and Chloe said yes, although he looked more like a boy, not at all like an adult. Callias suggested that he must be handsome, and Chloe, without thinking about how that might sound, replied that he was the most handsome man she had ever seen. Then she became afraid that the Marquis might misunderstand her, because she had said several times that Callias was very reminiscent of her friend. Callias continued asking questions, saying that he wanted to know more about the man whose appearance he had reminded Chloe of. "You got me?" Chloe said, terribly embarrassed. She said that her friend had never teased her like that, and she thought that when the Marquis smiled like that, she became even more like him. Chloe said that even after hearing the news of her upcoming marriage, her friend supported her. Callias asked if Chloe had spoken to her friend just before leaving. When she said yes, the Marquis's expression became visibly gloomy, and he said that he thought he might be acquainted with her friend, but since they had recently been in contact, he was apparently mistaken. Chloe objected that they couldn't be acquainted. He didn't even know about the existence of the Marquis. It seemed to her that she understood why the Marquis asked about her friend. Callias could not understand at all who this mysterious friend was. Chloe spoke about him so confidently. Callias asked the girl what this mysterious friend said about their marriage. Chloe replied that, of course, her friend was surprised by such unexpected news. In fact, she missed call terribly. But she only told the Marquis that he had given them his blessing. The Marquis asked if that was all, and Chloe wondered what else he wanted to hear. Callias said that the princess was very lucky to have a friend. "I think so too," said Chloe, looking at the Marquis and unable to decipher his reaction. She had never seen such an expression on Callias's face. She knew that it couldn't be true, but for some reason it seemed to her that he was jealous of her. To take her mind off things, Chloe asked Callias to tell her more about Ronheim. She had never had anyone in her life who could tell her about these lands. This conversation was more to the Marquis's liking. Their small detachment climbed higher and higher into the snow-capped mountains. The Marquis noticed that Chloe's breathing had become heavy. This could be a symptom of altitude sickness, so it was decided to rest a little. Chloe was embarrassed that she was causing everyone inconvenience again. Suddenly, the Marquis noticed something in the distance and said that every time something like this happens, someone comes to say hello. "Hey!" shouted a man in a fur coat approaching them. "You're back!" he shouted as he approached so that his smiling face could be seen. Chloe was surprised because it was a child. Callias explained that it was Bihar from the Uttar tribe. They are nomads living on the lands belonging to Ronheim. Callias told Bihar that he always greeted them on this road to Ronheim. Bihar replied that he was glad to do so because he wanted to be the first to greet the king. Lady Rasa said that His Majesty would be staying here today, so Bihar came out to greet the guests. And then Bihar said that he had also gone out to see the Queen, who would grant Ronheim luck and prosperity, and Chloe was amazed by his words. Callias explained that Rasa was a seer of the Uttar tribe, and it seemed she knew in advance that they would stop here. Then Chloe asked why the boy called them King and Queen. Bihar was very happy. He wanted to know where the Queen came from, because he had never seen anyone more beautiful in these lands. Callias explained to Chloe that the nomads still refuse to believe that Ronheim is under Arenthal's control, so they continue to call him that. They are hard to accept change, and this will have to be treated with understanding. After these words, Callias turned to Bihar. He recalled that he had already asked many times not to call him king, and Bihar was at it again. It was especially not worth doing this in front of Her Highness the Princess of Arenthal. Bihar countered that the Princess of Arenthal was now their queen, and Callias sternly ordered him to apologize to Her Highness immediately. Then Bihar fell on his knees and began to bow to the ground, begging for forgiveness. He did not want to offend anyone. He simply made a mistake. Chloe thought sadly that it was wrong to bully a small child, but she couldn't even object. There were too many curious eyes around, and the people of Kavala might take this for treason. If there was a misunderstanding, it was unknown what Kavala would do, so she simply asked the boy to be careful from now on. She asked if he had raised the black lamb he had brought with him. It was so charming. Bihar realized that he seemed to be forgiven. He told that he himself looked after this lamb. Lady Rasa said that the guests might need a guide, so he decided to take him with him. Callias explained that if they went further, they would come across an icy path with hidden crevasses, which is what they call cracks in the glacier. They are so deep that the bottom is not visible, and if you fall into such a crevasse, it will be impossible to get out, which is why they are called death crevices. They are hidden under the snow, disappearing and reappearing from time to time, but the mountain goats raised by the Utars are very smart and are able to detect these crevices. Apparently, Rasa sent them a goat to ensure safety. Usually she sends an old, experienced goat as a guide, but today they will be led by a young one, and Callias did not understand what this meant, but Chloe was glad that this little one would lead them to the resting place. Yes, said Bihar. They set off on their journey as they had to make it before dark. Chloe was completely stunned by the sights that greeted them. The landscapes she had seen before were already very impressive, but the beauty of this one simply could not be described in words. Callias explained that the lake was formed by the melting of a glacier, a mysterious place where the colors change several times a day. Depending on the height of the sun, the lake can appear turquoise, deep blue, and even jade green. In her past life, Chloe couldn't even imagine how big the world was, but now the aching void in her heart is slowly starting to fill. Thank you, Marquis, Chloe said. She admitted that since their meeting she has learned something new every day. Callias replied that there was no need to thank him for that. They entered the nomad village. The people welcomed the appearance of the king. Lady Rasa was right. He brought his bride. It's been a while, Lady Rasa, said Callias, dismounting and being greeted by the news that they had been waiting for him for a long time. Rasa stepped forward and said that the gods themselves had directed her to them. My king, she said, bowing to Callias. She said she knew what he had been looking for so long. This thing is already very close. Most likely, Rasa was talking about the sacred relic, but Kavala had it. Callias told Chloe that he needed to talk to Rasa and that she should go get some rest. He went to the witch and asked her to tell everything as it was. She said that the thing Callias had been looking for so long was next to him, and now he wanted to know if it was the sacred relic, but Rasa replied that the gods had told her only two things. They spoke of the precious object being close at hand and of Callias's suspicion of his surroundings. As the jewel approaches and Callias' enemy draws his sword, he must keep his eyes open. Callias noted that Rasa's prophecies were always so murky. The seer said that since he is an active figure, one must be patient. If Callias does not despise the deity, he will find out about everything when the right time comes. Rasa suggested returning. The chieftain organized a feast. Callias said that, as always, he was in their debt. Rasa turned around and added that Callias was born to be king. No matter what happened, the Utars would be on his side. Rasa believed that there was no room for objection here. Callias, however, believed that king would be too grand a title for him, a man who was incapable of protecting anyone. Chloe found herself in a strange Utar dwelling, where the locals were pouring warm drinks for the guests. She didn't like the expression on the Marquise's face. She was worried that he had heard some bad news. The Utars asked if Her Highness liked the treat. Brantian explained that it was goat's milk with salt, and in this tribe, salt was more valuable than gold, so if the princess didn't like something, it was better to hide it. Chloe replied that she understood everything and took a sip of the hot drink. She said it tasted very good and thanked the owners for their generosity. Chloe asked if they could pour her another drink. Suddenly, Rasa hit Brantian on the shoulder with her staff. She said that he was overthinking things, so even with all his wisdom, he would come to the wrong answers. Rasa told him to think less and concentrate on his master's requests, and Brantian noticed that she was always picking on him. The seer sat down next to Chloe and their eyes met. Chloe didn't understand why this woman was looking at her like that. Maybe she did something wrong after all. Rasa suddenly leaned closer to the princess. She whispered that God had given her a second chance, and Chloe knew she meant she was being reborn, but it was unclear how the woman knew about it. There were a lot of people around. Chloe was afraid that someone would hear them, but fortunately, no one even looked in their direction. Chloe decided to pretend that she didn't understand what Rusa was talking about. She said that she had no idea what she meant. Rasa told her to hold on to this opportunity with all her might. The god has his own purpose, which he wants to achieve with Chloe's help. Rasa said that Chloe needs to trust herself and not rely on illusions. Chloe was completely stunned by everything she heard. Rasa explained that illusions were swirling around Chloe, making her weaker, but since no one had told her about their existence, she had to recognize the danger herself. Chloe muttered that she really didn't understand what any of this meant. She was puzzled and wanted to end the dialogue as quickly as possible, but Rasa touched her and said that she was dying, but she must not let death overtake her again. These words could mean that life-threatening situations will continue in the future. Rasa said that she couldn't explain everything to Chloe, but she would give her a hint, so the girl needed to remember her words. "Okay," Chloe said, looking after the seer. Callias asked what Rasa had told her, but Chloe replied that it was nothing special. Chloe said that she congratulated her on coming here and gave her blessing. Chloe hoped that Rasa would give her some advice instead of handing out food to all the guests herself. "Ras," said one of the warriors, looking at the seer. She noticed that he didn't get any bread, but Alex immediately offered him his. Rasa countered that everyone had their own portion, and there was no need to covet bread that does not belong to you. The warrior said that everything was fine, there was still enough food here. "Yes, that's how it should be," Rasa said. Chloe wondered if this situation could be a clue. She looked at Rasa, and it seemed as if she and the seer were alone in this tent. They spent that night in the tents of the Uttar tribe. Rusa's words disturbed Chloe so much that she could not sleep at all. She didn't know when they would be able to meet the seer again once Chloe left this place, so now was her last chance to find Rasa and find out the meaning of her prophecy. Chloe tried uncertainly to identify Rasa's dwelling from among the many similar tents. "Rasa, are you here?" the girl asked, peering inside cautiously, and then said that she needed to ask her about something. "What brings you here at such a late hour?" a voice came from behind Chloe. It was the Marquis, and Chloe thought he was sleeping, but he was here and reported that Rasa had gone to pray to her gods. Callias asked what Chloe wanted to tell the seer, and the girl said that in fact Rasa told her about the prophecy. She gave her some kind of hint, citing the situation with the bread as an example, but Chloe was still unable to understand what it all meant. "This must be your secret," said Callias. Chloe, after thinking, decisively answered that this was indeed the case, but she and the Marquis were in the same boat now, so she would be able to tell about him if Callias waited for Rasa with her. Callias happily agreed, but suggested going inside, as it was unbearably cold outside. The coals in the brazier inside the tent had not yet completely burned out, and Rasa should be back soon. It was strange that Chloe was betrayed by those she considered her family, but was able to trust the Marquis in such a short time. Chloe's experience simply screamed that you can't trust people, but he was silent about the Marquis. Chloe asked if the Marquis knew that the Empress had sent her here as a spy. She wanted there to be absolute trust between them. Callias replied that he knew it would happen, and Chloe asked if he had intentionally acted as if he had feelings for her so that rumors would spread. Callias replied that he thought the Empress would take advantage of the princess if he entered into this marriage, as there was no easier way to send a person to Ronheim. Chloe wondered if, in that case, if she tried to prove that she was not on Kavala's side, he would be able to believe her. She was afraid that she was only drawing more suspicion onto herself. Perhaps she should have told Callias about her past life. But then he might think she was crazy. Chloe had no way to prove to the Marquis that she was on his side. "Yes, I believe you," Chloe suddenly heard. She looked up at Callias and asked him if he believed her. The Marquis replied with a smile that he had no one else to rely on except his own wife, and with these words, all of Chloe's worries disappeared without a trace, because he said that he trusted her. She asked what would happen if it turned out that she had lied to the Marquis, but Callias replied that this was not so, and that liars had completely different eyes. Callias said that when he received her letter, he wondered who could have sent it, so he decided to attend the banquet. And there he saw Chloe, trembling with fear under everyone's eyes, but looking straight at him when the girl asked for a gold mine as a wedding gift. She looked simply stunning, but Callias's attention was drawn to her desperate look. The more he got to know Chloe, the more he became convinced that she was the kind of person who was ready to move forward no matter what, and he was very proud of her. This is exactly how he imagined her. Chloe thought that Marcus Rodrian had every reason to doubt, but he still trusted her. She was very grateful to him for this and wanted to tell him about it. Callias remarked that his mistress spoke words of gratitude too often, and Chloe replied that it was because she had something to thank him for, in fact. Callias asked if he could ask her for something then. He said calling him Lord and Marquise, being his wife, sounded a little cruel. He would prefer that Chloe called him by his first name. By name, Chloe asked again and immediately agreed. Chloe said it would be really easy, especially compared to everything he had done for her, so she asked him to call her by her first name too. Callias assured that it would be an honor for him. She said that it seemed the maids had also been ordered to keep an eye on the Marquis. Chloe didn't know why, but Cavala had no intention of taking her eyes off Callias, so he had to be more careful. Callias said that he knew perfectly well what Cavala wanted. Chloe didn't need to worry. The Empress wouldn't touch him until this thing was in her hands. Chloe thought with horror about what Cavala and Andrea might want from Callias. Andrea had been pursuing the goal of killing the Marquis even in her past life, but she didn't understand why he spoke as if they wanted something else. Callias asked Chloe for forgiveness. He knew that his knights were suspicious of her, but she should not pay attention to it. Chloe replied that she understood why the Ronheimians did not like her. Callias explained that they wouldn't have acted that way if they knew Chloe wanted to leave the imperial family, but he simply lacked the leadership skills to convince his subordinates of that. Chloe said that he must have had his reasons for it. She understood that just as she couldn't tell him about her return to the past, Callias also had things that he couldn't tell her, and it had nothing to do with trusting her. She said that everyone has their own secrets. Callias thanked her for her understanding. He noticed that it seemed that Rasa was delayed. It was already too late, so it was better for them to leave and come back in the morning. Chloe said that was a good idea. Callias took her hand, and Chloe felt that his hand was very warm and reliable. This warmth seemed to penetrate under the skin. It was a very strange sensation, but very pleasant. Together they left Rasa's tent and were now walking through the snow. Callias asked if Chloe liked stars. Chloe looked up. The whole sky was covered with them. There were endless numbers of them, and they were beautiful. The whole of Ronheim was incredibly beautiful. Callias agreed with this completely. Chloe recalled that Callias said he lacked leadership skills, but she thought he would have made a good king. Chloe explained that he truly loved his kingdom, and it was clear from his words and actions. Callias said that Chloe called him king. Chloe simply could not have found a more suitable word for him after the resurrection. Only the thirst for revenge helped her to live on. But now she wanted to help the people who gave her a new home, to return what belonged to them. Chloe stated that she wants to retake this kingdom fairly, and wants to see Callias sitting on the royal throne. She genuinely wanted to help Callias. Chloe believed that everything should be in its place, and she was willing to do anything for this. Chloe felt incredible this morning. She still felt the warmth. "Chloe," Callias called out to her. He said that Rasa was not feeling well, so it would be unlikely that he would be able to see her. But there was no need to worry. Her prophecies would manifest themselves after some time. Chloe was only worried that she was too stupid to understand when that time would come. Callias said that this was not the case at all, and if she needed Rasa's help, they would definitely meet again. Chloe thanked him. She really did feel better. At that moment, 2 Utarians approached her and presented her with a wedding gift. They said that while creating the necklace, they prayed for God to protect the queen, and the stones that were used in the work resemble the color of the lady's eyes. Chloe thanked the craftsmen and assured them that she would take good care of it. Yes, Chloe thought as she waved goodbye to the Utarans and drove away with Callias. The day Chloe decided to change the past, her life began to change too. She would overcome all difficulties with her head held high. A few days later, Ronheim Castle came into view. Callias helped Chloe dismount and informed her that they were there. Chloe looked at the castle that would now be her new home. People came out to the gate, and now they greeted Chloe as their mistress. Chief Steward, Mainz Villeno, also said he was glad to see his master back safely. Callias thanked him for looking after the castle. He ordered all the courtiers to be gathered so that he could introduce his wife to everyone. They entered the castle and proceeded to the ceremonial hall, where all the people had gathered to see the new Marquise of Ronheim. People were whispering. No one understood why the Princess of Arenthal had come here. Chloe looked at them. She understood that it would be difficult, but their reaction was much colder than she could have imagined. The girl closed her eyes and thought that she had encountered even greater difficulties along the way, and there was no need to strain herself every time. "I'm Chloe Rodrian," she told the assembled girls, and expressed hope that they would get along. And yet, Chloe felt like she could sense someone's unkind gaze in the distance. This woman looked at her from the open gallery.